have DLR with us tonight, one of the three architect firms that is talking to us about a potential bond issue in the fall. Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having us. It's good to get out of the house. hopefully everybody had a good Thanksgiving with their families and loved ones. So we are a DLR group, and so thank you for having us here tonight. We want to just introduce some information to you. I'm Eric Barron, client leader, project manager for DLR Group. I've been with DLR Group for about 20 years and solely focused on education for my career. I've worked on some other project types and things that our group supports, but that's my main background. With me tonight is Andrew Van Leeuwen. He's an architect designer. Been with DLR Group for over 12 years, partner in crime, and three small kids, and really passionate about education and everything that it has to offer. And then my other colleague here, Stephanie, she's non-traditional. So she's DLR Group employs a lot of different types of staff members. So she's not an architect, she's not an engineer, she is a bond specialist. And so her career and background has been in politics and in journalism, and just recently finished serving as mayor pro tem. So
perfect timing, right before the vote ended.
So we're glad to have her on our team, and that's kind of unique to DLR Group. We do hire a lot of different non-traditional staff members, educators, engineers, bond specialists to help us accomplish the missions that you all ask us to do. We're going to keep this kind of informal tonight, so please ask questions as you choose, as you like. We do like to support the year and support the entities that we work for and the partnerships that we have. We're a 100% employee-owned company, so we are vested in your success. Without you, we don't have much to stand on. And we've been around for 50 plus years. We started in 1966, really geared towards the educational market, and we've exploded with that since then. And part of that partnership, having worked with you in the past, having worked with other clients in the past, 80% is based on our repeat clients. And so that's a testament to how we do business and what we try to accomplish with you. It's not about us, it's not about our solution, it's about what works for your community. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the community engagement session here in a little bit. Just for those that are new or have not worked with us before, we're an integrated design firm, meaning we have all the disciplines in-house, as I just talked about, engineering, graphic design, you name it. And we're proud to have partnered with you on the Laura Ingalls Wilder project a number of years ago, and then most recently working on a master plan with you to kind of help identify and prioritize some of the things that you're talking about and that Art had listed in his opening remarks there. So the question at hand really is, why are we all here tonight, right? Why DLR Group? If you take nothing else away from tonight, from the things that we talk about, we're trying to hammer home three topics here. One is the community engagement process, how we approach things. It's a little bit different than a typical architecture and engineering firm. We like engagement, we like to listen. That's part of our tagline, listen, design, deliver, in understanding what it is for you, because every community is different. If we came in with just kind of a pre-baked solution, everybody might have a different response to it, including your community members. We can and will hit the ground running. Again, through our previous experience with you, we have experience. We know your facilities. We've been in your facilities. We also did the nurse's office relocation at your high school. So we are adept at what you're trying to accomplish here. And just like you, proud traditions and unlimited possibilities. When we work together, you have a lot of history in your district. We have a lot of history at DLR and a lot of experience. When you put that together, the sky's the limit. We can come up with a lot of different creative solutions for different things. So that's why DLR Group, and hopefully we can show that to you over the course of the next 40 minutes. So, like I said, we do things a little bit differently at DLR Group. And so we're going to play a little bit of Jeopardy tonight in honor of Alex Trebek. You're going to kind of choose the path. It's your project. It's your district. We're going to open it up and we're going to show you how it's done here by talking a little bit about district opportunities, about what our understanding is and what, where we think you're headed. But then we're going to turn it over to you. I'm not going to call on anybody, so don't get nervous. And you're going to choose the topics that you want to talk about, and then we'll go from there. So first of all, Andrew's going to start off and just talk a little bit about what we know about you and what you're thinking.
All right, I'll take district opportunities for 500. Is that right? That's how this goes.
Very good.
I will not I won't talk in questions as well, I'll say at the end of the day here. So district opportunities, like Art mentioned, we met a few weeks ago just to talk about kind of the next steps, what we heard, what we listened. You guys have made a lot of improvements over the last few years, improving your elementary security and safety, district stadium improvements, this administrative office here, a lot of great things happening within the district, and really this is the opportunity to continue that conversation, continue that improvement for the district. Our master plan, which we brought a copy here, completed about a year ago now, with a lot of things identified and a lot of opportunity within there, but just a lot of great information as far as deferred maintenance items, things that can be and could be improved through a next step in the process. But the 4 priorities that we heard, that support services facility, really maybe not the most glamorous type of facility, but definitely a needed support service to make sure that the operations of the community school district here in Untitled can function efficiently and effectively. Looking at a couple things at the high school, kind of combining some entry improvements for the gym and auditorium, potentially expansion of maybe a media center, commons, student union type space, and really revitalizing some of those spaces within the high school. And then even looking at some of maybe the equity among the kind of the west wing of the high school and the east wing of the high school. And then potentially some conversion of the middle school computer lab to additional classrooms to help alleviate some of the growth and capacity challenges there. Again, no number's been identified, but maybe something in that $10 million ballpark. And then looking at the bond issue here in September 2021. So that's what we heard. And knowing your facilities, having walked through them and understood them from an electrical, engineering, mechanical, structural, architectural standpoint, we really see a lot of opportunities within those. We will be handing out a kind of a document that shows some of our recent work in these, so we won't spend a lot of time going through a bunch of case studies, but there are a few things that we can touch on there. So a lot of opportunity there, just kind of finding ways to decompartmentalize building services, and gas and oil and food services, and making sure those have appropriate storage, and electronic or IT services, making sure those all have the right adequate spaces to be located. Over at the high school, again, we kind of identified 2 areas for potential additions and expansions. Looking at maybe some type of an activities event entry on the northwest side there, and then maybe some of the media center commons expansions to the south. And then the area highlighted in red maybe looks at that east wing of the high school as what types of improvements and modernizations can happen there to help provide great quality environments throughout the existing high school there. And just a few of those pictures of those potential opportunities within your facility. And then over at the middle school, really converting that computer lab into classroom space to support some of the growth needs and some of the additional capacity challenges that are being felt there in that facility. So Eric's going to touch on real quickly maybe a case study that aligns to some of the similar challenges that you're all facing and how we've helped the Carlisle School District work through those in their recent master plan.
Yeah, so Carlisle, neighboring district just up the road, they started out very similarly to you. They had a bunch of needs, they had some ideas, they were kicking around the idea of a bond referendum. They had, just like you, maybe an amount in mind, but they weren't quite sure. And so we got started with them, and again, very much like your high school, they're very landlocked, right? Their high school and their elementary and their stadium are all on that one site. They cannot expand beyond that. And so looking at how they use land in an appropriate way, not just for today or not just for tomorrow, really down the road. And so one of the things that we help them do through the course of a master plan and then kind of some additional priority setting, was to understand, how they could use the land that they have and really kind of flip the model, flip the picture. They hadn't really done a master plan for their district, and so that red arrow there kind of shows their current athletics were all on the south side of the building. And we said, well, keep going that way and you're going to fall off the hill because of the grade differential and as you get into Highway 5 there. So we said, what if you kind of flip the model, right, and think about athletics on the north end of the site and then preserve some area for academics in the future. And what that led to was the first project, which was a parking lot at the south end of the site. So that yellow greenish piece there was the first project in a line of basically 3 phases, and we're about to enter phase 3 here. So since that time, all the things that you see that are listed up there, they have completed all those. And that was through the running of about a $17 million bond referendum. Again, they had kicked around some ideas of numbers, and they really weren't sure and couldn't test the model of what that really meant. And so us, working with them, the parking lot project, the softball project, which is in the lower left, the high school band edition, which is in the center, bottom center, and then culminating with a new family consumer science, and then Fieldhouse edition on that north side. That all kind of came to fruition by setting those priorities and understanding through our process what that number really needed to be. And through the bidding process and through design and all that, we were able to save them some dollars through, and we'll talk a little bit about that later in bid amounts versus actual. And they're about to enter phase 3 and do a support building just like you guys are thinking about. So it's kind of interesting how it all kind of comes to fruition when you just kind of bite off that first little chunk and then work the process. So I told you it's coming. Jeopardy slide is here. So it's a free-for-all. Anybody can, you don't have to buzz in or anything. But what is important to you out of all those topics? Where can we start first? What can we talk about?
I want to hear about the maximizing the dollars.
Okay.
Because I think you got the ideas, but we have no idea if that's doable with.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, the first thing is communication, right? And so thank you for inviting us here tonight because we're communicating. We're kind of talking and we're kind of understanding, where it is that you want to go. And it really starts with listening. So we haven't had a lot of time to listen to you. This is our first, meeting tonight formally in relation to this. And so we did not come with, pre-engineered solutions to tell you, exactly you can get $10 million and you can get these 5 things or these 3 things. Because every choice that you make, every priority that you have, has a different value assigned to it based on the decisions that you and your administration and your end users will make. So for us, it's about to maximize the dollar, we have to start by communicating with each other and listening. Our project approach is very cost management driven. That's one idea in the triangle. You've probably seen something like this before, even in your own business. But one of those things, we're all going to choose a priority of what matters to you, whether it's cost, whether it's time, getting this thing done in a timely manner, or in a short amount of time, or what the quality level is. We don't do a lot of gold-plated stuff for education facilities, and that's okay, right? We're being respectful with the dollar that the citizens have entrusted to you, whether it's through your own management process and your own funding sources, or whether it's through a bond referendum. So we have to make these work in unison and in harmony with each other. So part of our process is really moving up that decision-making and prioritization piece ahead of the game. So what you're seeing here is on the left-hand side, that gray bar is the effort and the effect that you have, the decision-making process that you have. And on the bottom, you have our design process, which is pre-design, schematic design, design development, and so on and so forth. The black bar there, the one that's labeled number 3, is the typical design process that most A&E firms will go through. And they're kind of going along and they're making decisions. And then you get to this middle point here where you have all these decisions that are now coming together And then you find out, well, geez, we're either over budget, or we're not sure that maybe the priority needs to change because we went down a path and we tested it too far. What DLR Group likes to do is number 4, is move that decision-making bubble closer up front. And you can see that for number 1, the ability to make and impact a change, we can throw things against the wall. We can toss the ideas out there with minimal effort to kind of test things and test the strategy and test the cost before we get so far down a road that it costs you more money to kind of reverse the train and reverse the effects that you've done. And all the while we're monitoring the marketplace, bidding climate right now. I want to say it's a buyer's market. It's great, right? But the reason for that is because of COVID. So there's a double-edged sword. I haven't heard anybody say it's great that we have COVID. But it is great that we have a buyer's market right now for contracting services and things. All of that together, quality control. DLR Group believes in beginning that process early on. We have a very in-depth quality control and assurance process. This is just kind of a sample of that book that we follow. I think there's 172 items just in the first chapter that we need to go through in order to get a project started with you. And that's not to say that it's very cumbersome. This is my Bible. This is what I have to work through when I'm leading you guys through a decision-making process. But what it means is that we're nailing all those early decisions that I just showed you on that bubble, and we're kind of bringing that together early so that we don't make an oops later on and then have to redo something. Some of the tools that we do to maximize value for you, everything we do is internally run on Revit, building information modeling, how we use tools, and we can involve you in this process. We have 3D visualization tools. I wish you could come to our office. We're closed right now, but we can actually bring that to you and set up a VR station right here and walk you through whatever solution it is that you come up with as we're going through that, and be able to see it real time. All of our engineers, Stephanie, all of us work on those same platforms so that we can all see that together and maximize the value for you and understand what the value of an early decision makes. Cost control, I just said starting with the data. Andrew's going to show you in a little bit about how we use data to inform some decisions, especially in the community process. Getting the input back from community members, putting that all together, maximizing that through a filter, right? The mission, the vision, the fiscal capabilities of your district. We have to understand those things before we can just throw out a number and say, yep, $10 million feels like the good thing. Maybe it's 11. Maybe it's 9.2 or something, whatever that number is. And then we're going to affect the time and the money aspect of prioritizing how things get done and in what order they get done, because there's oftentimes a sequence. The traditional cost estimating method is kind of that W-shaped peaks and valleys. I don't like to work that way. It means there's a lot of redo, and that means there's a lot of cost expenditure for you. I never thought I'd say this. My son would be absolutely thrilled. He's a high schooler. And, when I say, yeah, the sine wave is back, right? I like to work on that. And I'm not a math guru or whatever, but that red line in the middle is kind of where we like to be. It's, there's a little bit of ups and downs, and that's the evolution of the process. But it's a smooth process so that all of our integrated team members can work together. Okay? Maximizing value for you shows you where your dollars go. Everything that we do is open book. We do everything in-house. So we illustrate for you clear budget summaries. We manage your total project budget. A lot of firms and stuff, well, just what's your construction amount? Well, that's great, but I'd also like to know what you have planned for furniture and what you have planned for land acquisition if we have to do that or whatever that is, because that affects your bottom dollar, and it's the total project budget. And that integrates very well with our software platforms. Okay. Maximizing value also means energy savings. Even in this room, LED lighting, things like that, efficient mechanical systems. These are just a couple of the schools that we've highlighted. That reduction there shows over and above code minimum. Those are choices, priorities that those districts made in order to achieve that and then on the back end, see longer-term value. So annually, just in the last 5 years, the districts that we worked with are saving $2.3 million annually in just energy costs. That's money that goes direct back into your general fund, and then it's applied back for, for educational opportunities for staff. And then I mentioned earlier, budget versus bid. These projects here, we have a really good track record. We monitor the market. We try to maximize your value and show you exactly where your dollars are going, so that you can see a project budget versus the bid amount. Are there times where we're higher? Yes, we're all human. But by and large, we do a really good job at sticking to or under our bid amounts, the project budget amounts. And even for, I think you might have had lunch or dinner with Steve Bass at Urbandale maybe recently, talking about his new fitness center. So that's just another example there. They had a budget, and they went around, they did some tours around the state of different facilities to see what it was that their dollars could buy. You have to understand what's out there before you can just say, well, yeah, I think that's what I want. Unless you actually know what it is. And so we were able to do that. They set a budget of $4.5 million, and we brought it in about 4.036, and they're able to then do additional projects after that. So thank you for asking about maximizing your budget and maximizing the value. Who wants to go next?
I'll do an Ask Anything.
All right.
Obviously, I know Eric and Andrew, and I've spoken with them a number of times, but lots of times when you get a construction firm, you're not sure who you're going to work with. Who would we see on this project, and what's your role as an architect in a project where there's not a construction manager?
Sure. So DLR Group is uniquely set up to handle that. So not only our three smiling faces, you'll see, during the course of the project. We all play an integral and different role within the project. As your client leader, as your project manager, I'm going to be here throughout. As a project designer, Andrew is going to be here pretty much throughout, beginning to end. We come in and at different times. Usually we're tied at the hip. Stephanie's going to play an integral role very early on in the process through that bond and community engagement piece. Talking about construction, we do involve our project architect, who will, whatever projects are developed, they will be integral from start until finish. But we also have a construction administrator in-house. We have one in the field, and we have one in the office. Christina's in the office, and she supports the individual that's out in the field. So Tyler is our construction administrator. That's his sole job. Every day he's on the road, going from job site to job site, managing and looking at comparing what's being done versus our specifications and the drawings and the things that we set up. I told you about the quality assurance manual. That's part of our quality assurance process, is making sure that things get done the way they're supposed to get done. If that drywall is supposed to have a level 4 finish on it, out of 5 levels, we expect a level 4 finish. I am not afraid, Andrew's not afraid, Tyler's not afraid. Our entire team is not afraid to say, I'm sorry, that just doesn't meet the spec, you need to take it out. Sure, people get mad at us, but you expect that of us. We expect that of our construction team, no matter who it is. And working in the educational environment, my entire career has been with Chapter 26, Iowa Public Bidding Laws, of how to accomplish that.
And I would say even on the budget versus bid spreadsheet we showed, that was a mix of general contractors or construction managers. It's our process, the framework stays the same. It's been proven throughout both scenarios, whether it's a general contractor bid or a construction manager.
So they're a partner in the design team. So whoever that may be, if it's a general contractor, a CM, it's the same for us. Okay. Please don't ask why the sky is blue. Any other questions while we're out there?
I'll go to the community engagement with I want to preface the question though. When we built the middle school here in this community, and we built Laura Ingalls Wilder, we know we needed a middle school, we know that years later we needed a grade school. That's where we started with community engagement, getting all stakeholders together. So you're starting from zero, and everybody can do it and work together. how would you see community engagement in a limited project like this, where we're not saying, what all do you want? We're saying, what do you think about these things, to somehow limiting it? So-
Yep,
Yeah,
perfect.
no, I think we've got a good case study to talk through that. And as Eric mentioned, stakeholder engagement, bringing people to the table early and often is really what makes a project successful, especially when you're going to a bond issue and asking for their buy-in, literally, to help support the project. So collaboration starts with listening, developing multiple options, whether that's with a core group like this or a large group at large. We have a framework for our process, but we mold and shape that framework based on every unique district, because every district has unique dynamics, so we want to support that in any way we can. Compromising, building consensus is key throughout the process, and that's something that we use various tools to help develop that, bring in data to help inform those decisions so that we're not making decisions just on feelings, but we're also making them built on data. I know Stephanie's had some good success with some of the engagement tools.
Absolutely. So going beyond kind of what you think of traditionally with community engagement and outreach of having the in-person meetings and all the in-person conversations, certainly that's a piece of it. But now really, especially in times of COVID that we're in, technology is playing an even bigger role. And we're really seeing a lot of folks are even engaging more when it's just technology. So we have a number of different surveys and software that we use to really bring the information to them. So if it's a conversation through Facebook Live, if it's a survey, if it's an online poll, we're really coming at them in a variety of different ways so that folks are able to interact with the district in the way they're most comfortable interacting.
All right, so we've been able, at DLR, to work remotely much before March of this year. We've been able to, through this process, work remotely 100% and still maintain our productivity, our efficiency, and making sure we can meet our clients' needs. One of the tools that we're using currently is called Mural, and you're seeing a little bit of an animation. This is an online, basically endless whiteboard that we've used for visioning sessions to understand wishes, wants, needs, understand priorities, do dot polling, various engagement efforts that, as Stephanie mentioned, allows you to be a little bit more anonymous, if you will. So sometimes at a public forum or a town hall meeting, usually the loudest voice is the one that's heard the most, right? So how do you make sure you're getting the feedback and the information from maybe someone who's a little bit more quiet or reserved? Well, these online tools actually really help facilitate that and really bring forth those voices so that all voices are heard at the table to provide the best kind of well-rounded input and feedback from the district at large. So this is a tool that we use in our engagement process when we're designing projects. We use it internally as a team for our own team discussions, but something that we can offer depending on how long we are virtual or in person or whatever the needs may be. So a little bit to the question.
So have you been going through projects with COVID, with these stages where you're getting all the public?
Yeah,
Okay, and it's
yeah.
worked well?
Yeah. For
Okay.
Pleasantville, we just did a stakeholder engagement process through Mural and Zoom coupled together. And Tony Ellsworth, the superintendent there, was just floored about the feedback that we got and just really appreciated the tools that we could bring to help gather that and keep the project moving and not letting things go to a standstill. So to be very specific to your question, at Lennox Community School District, they were working through, kind of internally as a board, they had developed some priorities. And those priorities had a lot of values assigned to them, and they were kind of wrestling with, okay, what's the next step? So our team got involved in the process. They had to pass a bond issue. They had a series of questions or series of projects to go through, and we helped them prioritize that. And we brought in district feedback and through a couple different tools here. So we were pre-pandemic, so we're doing a lot of dot polling. We engaged students. We took the priorities of the board and helped the stakeholder understand why those were needs. So we weren't completely throwing all that out and saying, we're not going to look at that. We're going to start with something new. So we took those needs because those were priorities. Those have been validated. Maybe some of those things you identified are in this master plan too. And presented those with some of our, maybe subtle tweaks or considerations, and brought that to students, brought that to community members, brought that to staff, and really got their feedback. You can see on this top middle image here, the floor plan that shows kind of a red dot, green dot, where are things good, where are things bad, and understanding the why, to help the narrative begin to roll into why this is a priority for the district. So we developed, I think, option A through F or G at some point and really went through a lot of iterations to throw things at the wall and see what stuck for them. What it came down to is A through G as part of the project list, and dollar values assigned to each one of those. So anywhere from a $1.2 million project with some stadium updates all the way up to a $7 million auditorium and a total capital project needs of $20 million. Now their bonding capacity, their credit limit essentially was $20 million. So as a community, they had to wrestle with, do we want to max out the credit card, or do we want to hold some money back because you don't know what may happen in 5 years and 2 years. So we had these projects, A through G, identified. We walked the walked the community through what these needs were, what would happen in each one of these. We helped with some floor plans to help illustrate and communicate that. And then we did exit tickets after each one of these community sessions. So they were able to say, what project do I support? How much am I willing to support? What does this mean to my tax impact? Is my taxes going to go up by $10, $20, no impact? And they could make those informed decisions. So one of the things we did with all of that data from every single community meeting, we gathered data just on 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that had options for them to select, is what we compiled into an online dashboard, a project prioritization dashboard. So I'm going to open this up here on the web. And so this was used, can be shared to the community. It was really helpful for the board to understand what the people were saying and feeling. So I'm just going to zoom into a few of these here.
And the reason that this was so important for Lennox was because they had, we just talked about that loudest voice. They had a very strong contingent talking about auditorium and fine arts. That's fine. If that's what you want, that's where we'll go. And that seemed to be the resonating voice. After we did these community forums, and what Andrew's going to show you here, it became very apparent that that was a very small chunk of what the community at large was actually looking towards, and what the board was hearing versus what they were actually doing.
So you can see based on the data here, about 58% of people would support a $13 million bond issue. People, bless their heart, would want to spend it all, right? We want every project, but that was about 29%. So that helped give the board some feedback that says, we're okay, we still have a majority of people wanting to support 13.3 million. Well, what does that mean? What does that look like in those projects? So we looked at existing structure, kind of the maybe window replacement, roof replacement, classroom additions, the auditorium addition, career and technical education addition, and we outlined that data based on vote. So when we looked at everybody's first vote, we could see Project A, which was keep the building, upkeep going, and Project F really rose to the top. Even it's extremely more when you add the second vote. People's second vote said Project A and F are a major priority. So we knew right then we have to have those on this bond issue because that's what the committee is going to support. And you as a board member can say, I'm just showing this is what you guys told us, right? I'm not making anything else up. I don't think we should, this is what you're telling us we should do. So what we found is through this process, as they start to add in more votes, you'll see on the third vote, the career and technical education expansion, and the athletic expansion there was important, all the way down to the sixth vote, really left us with showing that the auditorium was the lowest priority, and as Eric mentioned, that was probably the most vocal people at a town hall event. But when people were able to really tell us what they thought anonymously, they were not willing to support that, even because they didn't want to raise their hand and say that because the loudest voice in the room was just preaching that. And I'm a performing arts guy, don't get me wrong. Played in pep band, all that good stuff, show choir. All right, so the beauty of this for the board was that, again, they could take the data. These were the projects that they had identified as a board, as an administrative team. A few things were changed and molded as we talked and asked questions, bringing our perspective and our experience in from working with school clients across the state, and wove that in to help create a proposal to go to the district with. And so that bond issue passed. When was that?
That was in February. Yeah.
That passed. I forget the percentage, but it was over the 60% plus one. And really the board is happy with the outcomes as it met the needs, and it was really a community was brought into that process as well.
And that was all done prior to the bond, prior to the bond referendum's done. So a lot of times you'll hear about, oh yeah, let's set the bond amount and then we'll have a community meeting and tell them what they're gonna get, right? This was kind of flipped again on end, and that was done before the bond amount was ever set. And you kind of did a straw poll, and then after that was done, and we were able to mold the things, and then say, yeah, we have this dollar amount, and then have community meetings after that, the support went through the roof, because they actually saw the data, and they understood why they were doing it, rather than just getting through there and assuming that it was administration-led, or a very small closed circle, and then going out and trying to sell it to them.
Yep.
So, but you had a question?
Yeah. You guys had done the facility studies for us a while back. Is there anything that wasn't on our list that you guys saw during the facility studies that you thought maybe should be on the list of things we're looking at that would make sense to you guys as having done that study?
Sure. Yeah, I know the support services building is definitely something, and the 14th Street facility as well. I think one of the questions I know when the process started, just thinking about that online learning, what that may look like, and that may have all changed at this point as well, was one of the projects that was discussed as well. So I think, looking back at the list, the middle school expansion and kind of renovation there, but being able to expand some of the classrooms. We've looked at your charts on the enrollment, so as that continues to grow, what makes more sense if you look at converting the middle school pure lab into classrooms, or maybe rethinking what a media center looks like in today's world, adding classrooms or adding collaborative areas or adding flex spaces may be something to consider versus a renovation internally to the school. And maybe money better spent on that side of things. So that'd be one thing to consider. Yep.
Yeah, so maybe bond support follows community engagement, yeah. My favorite part at the end. So as Eric and Andrew have mentioned, one thing that really sets DLR apart, we think, is we have an entire team of folks led by myself who really focus on elections. My background is not architecture, it is politics and campaigns. I've spent the last 18 years working at local, state, and national level campaigns throughout the Midwest, including a few of those in your seat as an elected official, so bless all of you for that. So I really understand and come at it from an approach of what is the community going to want, what is it going to take to get their support, what can we do to get to that yes vote on election day. So as a part of that, we have a full team, as I said, behind me, so we can really be your campaign team throughout the entire bond election process. So we can create all of the collateral, which you'll see later. We can help you with strategy. We can help you with messaging, social media, really the full gamut. So you're able to continue to do the work of educating kids, and we can work on the campaign side of it. So I'll run through that process. It starts with what we call the 20-60-20 rule. And you've all been up for elections, so you'll recognize this rule. So we have 20% of the world who will say yes to anything that you ask for, any bond election. They love schools, they love your district, they will always be a yes vote. They are my favorite people. We kind of ignore those people. We know where they live. So on the other side, we have 20% of people who will absolutely never say yes. They don't care, they hate it, they're no, they're not going to support you. We don't mind ignoring them. We definitely ignore them as well. And we really focus on that 60% of people who are in the center, who are willing to have the conversation, who are interested in getting information, who are a possible or likely yes vote. So that's where we kind of live, in that 60%. And then we split them into groups. So we look at and really target vested patrons. So vested patrons, which makes sense, are people who have a vested interest in the school district. So parents, employees of the school district, educators, people who really are predispositioned to support what you're doing by and large. And then non-vested is everyone else. So we do talk to them a little bit, of course, because they are going to be voting members as well, but really target those vested folks. And again, you'll see why. This is just some of the reasons we've seen from consistent polling. Vested voters have a vested interest, so they care more about the quality of education, what the buildings are like, what their programming is like for their kids. You can see taxes falls pretty far down the list. On the non-vested side, they tend to care most about how's it going to impact my taxes. And further down the list, you can see the educational piece of it, which makes sense. But again, another reason why we really want to target those vested folks. So to do that, then I have another number rule. We apply the 70-70 rule. So we want to get 70% of your vested voters in the district registered to vote and 70% of them to vote. And we have found almost consistently that if we're able to do that, coupled with all of the work that the architects and our team are doing on the front end to really set a scope that resonates with them, we almost always are successful in that effort. So the question becomes, how do you identify the 70%, right? So I did a scenario for you all, and I'll run through it. So you have about 14,600 registered voters in your school district right now. So we are averaging about a 30% turnout of bond elections right now. So assuming that that holds pretty steady, that's about just under 4,400 votes that would be cast in an election. So as you know, you need 60% plus 1. So that says that you're going to need about 2,600 votes to get a successful bond passed here. So then we look at the other side. So you have about 3,500 students. It's a good start. And then we look at available vested voters. And this gets more specific when hopefully we're able to work together on this project. But typically we say about 1.6 vested, so parents largely, per student. So that gives you about 5,600 vested voters kind of in your population. So then if you say 70% of those folks are registered and 70% of them vote, that gets you to 2768, which always makes me very happy when that number is larger than the bottom on the left. so that means that you have more than enough votes within that vested community to get a bond passed. So that's great news. We think about that when we tailor a campaign, so we're really, again, focusing on kind of the people who have the vested interests, again, talking to the folks on the other side too, but that's always a really great thing to see. So then we apply a two-path approach once we've kind of identified who we're targeting. On one side is the fact-based. That's what you all are able to do as a district. Obviously, you can't advocate for the yes side. So as I said, we're able to walk through that whole process with you, help you with messaging, help you with collateral, community meetings, the whole gamut on that side. And then I also get to act as an intermediary, along with Piper Sandler, along with our architecture team, to kind of partner with the promotional side. So I can work with your Vote Yes group and do the more promotional kind of door knocking, yard signs, all the fun campaign stuff, the good political stuff. So I can help those folks as well through the entire thing. So you're really running side by side, parallel through the entire process, which is typically about 10 to 12 weeks through the whole campaign. So we do a pretty robust, as you'll see, messaging calendar here. I do one for the district side as well as one for the Vote Yes folks. And really it's just targeted again at repeating that message. You all know, I'm sure, you have to hear something 8 times before it sinks in. So we try to do that by reaching out to folks through different sort of channels there. So we want to have the same message every week. This is just an example of a previous one, not specific. And then we're going to apply that to different channels with messaging for every week. Same story on the Vote Yes side. So the Vote Yes folks get assignments every week of fun things that they get to do, like raising money and knocking on doors and all of that. Really just trying to empower your volunteers to know what they need to do to get through the election process and also being a resource to them as well. So as I mentioned, a variety of communication channels. This is changing a lot this year too. A lot of technology being applied to this piece of it as well. Social media is obviously very important. We've had a ton of Facebook Live meetings that have been very well received. More than even community in-person meetings have been often. So that's an interesting thought moving forward. But really just anything that you need that's going to be more robust, we really take a deep dive with you to figure out how your constituents, your residents get their information, and then tailor that to your needs as well. More samples of district materials, so you can kind of see, this is obviously the informational side, and then we work on the promotional piece of it as well. And again, this is all completely custom and tailored to you all. More fun Vote Yes stuff. And then social media as well. So we've helped in the past with district social media. We can work with your communications team. We can write the content. And same for the Vote Yes side. So really we want to make it as easy as possible for you all so we can come in and kind of take care of all of those fun pieces. And we think because of this program and because of, again, all the work that's done up front, we can be very successful at it. So we have an 87% success rate here in the state. So you'll see a list of the outcomes there, which again, I think really speaks to our process overall and what sets us apart. So, and I will say, incidentally, we are still seeing successful bond elections in COVID, which has been kind of an interesting thing in the Midwest. We've had a couple pass in Missouri just in the last couple of months by 79 to 82%, which is pretty interesting and incredible. I think in large degree, people's children are home with them every day, and now they're willing to pay millions and millions of dollars to take them out. So we are still seeing success and are very comfortable working within that environment.
Do you see any challenges with the fact that one of our higher priorities, and I know it has to be vetted out with the public, but it's the support services facilities. It's not a nice gym. It's not, you know what I mean? It's kind of a need to have. And it's not just like replacing windows. It's like you are taking a whole new building. So it's probably going to be costly compared to just, you know, like doing a roof or, I don't know.
Sure, yeah, so we've worked with districts who've had a similar situation in the support services, and honestly, we kind of frame it in a way as looking at it more and really campaign-wide, instead of talking about so much of the bricks and mortars, which are obviously a piece of it, we talk about how that will impact the student experience. So by having a new support services building, what are you gonna be able to streamline? How is that gonna help the kids, the educators, really what is the human impact on it?
Operational expenses
Yeah,
too, just being able to consolidate and have streamlined operational expenses too. You're saving money annually because you're taking.
Yeah, and that money can be put into educating kids,
Yep.
programming, yeah.
Now, that's what my question too, because it's hard to sell something like that, you know, because I've lived here a long time and I've never been in that building.
And it's really, and what happens, what people kind of forget for districts is, it's not so much about that particular project or that particular building. It's actually an opportunity to highlight what your district has done to date. So you guys just, renovated all of your elementary schools. You've done work at the high school. You've done work at the middle school. You've done work throughout the district. Celebrate the achievement of academics. What have you achieved, since you've all been in place? So it's as much about, yes, we need that as a support building. That's a functional heartbeat of the district. But it's an opportunity to communicate to the district that we've taken the dollars that you've entrusted to us and we've done smart things with them through this time. And the good news is that this is one of those projects that's on the tail end, right? You've taken care of a lot of the academics. Is there more academics going to be done? Absolutely, there always is. But, district offices, support buildings, things that are kind of administration-led, rightfully so, kind of tend to fall towards the back end. And if you can show that story and we can help you craft that story, that's where voters say, you know what, they've actually have done what we entrusted them to do, and then do a tour. Just invite them over and say, hey, come on, even in COVID, whatever, from a distance, look at the facility and then compare it to your middle school or compare it to something new that you just created. That story sells itself.
And to kind of piggyback off of that as well, what we've done that's been successful is, to both of your points, I haven't seen inside the building, I don't know what it looks like. We've been doing a lot of GoPros through the building, so sometimes I've given a kid a backpack, a GoPro to go through a crowded building, whatever it is, so that people really can see online, if it's Facebook, if it's on your website, they can do kind of a virtual tour and maybe see some of the things that they hadn't seen or wouldn't see otherwise, now that we can't really be in person as much. Yeah.
And was the support services including food storage too? Or was it just?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, we have other warehouse space.
They have warehouse and freezer space down there right now.
Yeah.
So
I'm just saying that could be something that's been brought out because of COVID.
I would say too, something that, we're really proud of our transportation department. Our bus inspections are awesome. We have incredible drivers. They're doing very good work with very poor conditions.
Well, it's a safety issue as well when you look at transporting our kids and feeding our kids. I mean, those are two major safety
Staff retention and
issues.
providing a quality environment there.
Yeah. So with that, I think we're at our time.
Yeah, and you did get a late start. I appreciate your help getting going there too.
Well,
Any parting shots for any of the members?
We know what he thinks, don't we, Black Frankie?
Thank you.
So Andrew's passing out, so my closing statement here is, we're back to that same question that I asked earlier. You're all here tonight for an important reason. Why DLR Group? Hopefully you've seen through the information that we shared with you that we are a community-focused firm. We can hit the ground running. We can talk about what your facilities are like. And despite all the things that you've accomplished today, you still have unlimited opportunities moving forward. And so we've left you a leave behind, which is kind of just a sampling of some projects and some information about us, about the firm, and the things that we've accomplished so that you have a reminder as you undertake your oration. So with that, thank you very much for having us again. It was good to get out of the house. I think my kids will probably appreciate that more so than me. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions at any time now between, and when you make a decision, please feel free to call me, call Andrew, call Stephanie. Our phones are always on, and email, text, Teams, Zoom, Google Hangout. We're adept at all those technologies, whatever the district is using. So thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I am going to keep the stream going, so we will be live here as we transition. But if you need to get up, stretch, whatever, fine. But then we're going to get right back at it here, and the recording is continuing. So no hot mic moments. Once again, I appreciate it. You didn't even sound
Well,
Right, that's part of the test, exactly, yeah.
Whoops.
Stay warm.
Yeah, we will. I hope everybody enjoyed last week, because
Gone.
it's gone.
I know.
This is the slide down.
That's right, if it's gonna be this cold, let's put some snow on the ground.
That's right.
Make it official.
Right, we're stuck inside anyway.
Right, exactly.
It's only 22 days until the days get longer, so
How many buses do we
we
have?
made it this far. Come on, don't give up on me now.
How many buses do we have? How many what? Buses? No, how many buses we have?
I thought, that's what I thought you said, but
No. I didn't even know that.
It should be some.
It should always be that. How you doing? Good, how are you doing? We're good. Good. Protocol for mask time, are we separating or wear them if you want?
I think we've got six feet, between everybody was the goal, except for the three of you. They'll be right there together. So I'll kind of leave it up to you, I guess, what your comfort level is.
Okay, all right. We'll see if the tech works first. You're doing all three tonight, right?
We are, yeah.
Okay. It's a lot of architects in a room for a night.
Yeah.
On a Monday night.
Thanksgiving pie.
Yeah, yeah. Because we're so entertaining.
I'll just set up your presentation a little bit so that the board kind of hears the same thing from everybody. First of all, thank you for coming out. We really appreciate it. And I mentioned that when we met, I talked about the fact we may do a bond issue in September. And, we don't know what that will be or exactly what will be in it yet. But the broad things we've talked about are that could end up being maybe a $10 million bond issue. And the board has talked about different priorities. We really need to do, auxiliary services or support services building. And then we've talked about some needs at the high school, a couple of which would be the auditorium, gymnasium type entrance area, potentially doing one new combined area. We've talked about a possible remodel on the south side here where maybe we would bump out the media center and have more of a student commons area that we don't have right now, and then backfill with some new classrooms. And we also talked about the need for some classrooms in the media center, some space we have with an old computer lab, potentially adding a few classrooms there. So those were kind of the board, things that came out of a board work session. And then tonight, we really just kind of hope to hear your philosophy and your approach, maybe a little bit about similar jobs you've done, and have some time for questions and answers, and just get to know you a little bit as a firm.
All right.
So we appreciate you being here. Thank you.
That's good. Well, thank you for having us. These are really high. I usually like to point. I'm gonna look back there, and you guys can look over my head, okay? All right, well, thanks for having us. Let's get started. We would really like to have this be a conversation more than a presentation. So we can stand up here and go on for a while, or we could have a conversation. So I would pick the latter of those if I were you. So, but before we're in Vision Architecture, and we have offices in Waterloo and Des Moines. We're probably the smallest firm you're talking to tonight in terms of total people. We're probably the largest firm in terms of a presence in Iowa, in terms of the number of registered architects in Iowa. We're an Iowa-based firm, and so we really focus here. All the projects that you're going to see today are really from our team. So we don't have an office in Boston that we're bringing that experience here. We're really, the stuff you see is the stuff that we've done as a team, and we're the people that you'll see as we go through this process. So a little bit about Envision first, just to give some credentials. We've done about over $1 billion in educational work in the last decade in terms of construction. Probably closer to 150 projects in K-12 right now. One of the facts we're really proud of is that 84% of our clients are really repeat clients. And so what that means to us is we want to develop relationships. We don't do a whole lot of marketing, but we are trying to really expand our K-12 market right now. Welcome. And we do a lot of that K-12 work, and Laura is in the community, and so we really thought it was a good fit to be here to develop that long-term relationship, and I'd love to add you guys to that list. Another thing that's unique about us is about 85% of our projects involve renovations. We do messy projects well, which is a lot of this kind of stuff that you're talking about. It's something that I don't know why. I think it's because they require creative solutions, and they're not just kind of off-the-shelf solutions. And so we kind of get into those things and geek out about them a little bit. So I'm Brad Leeper. I'm a partner in the firm. I'll be leading the process overall, and I'll be involved kind of throughout your process here. Now I'm going to let my team introduce themselves.
I'm Laura Peterson. I'm an educational planner and also an architect at Envision. I've been there 13 years and really head up all of our K-12 work with Brad. And on this project, I would be your point person all the way from kickoff through move-in date and kind of beyond. My husband grew up in Indianola, and we moved back here 3 years ago when it was time for our kids to start looking at schools because we wanted to send our kids to school here. So I have a kindergartner, Max, at Irving, and I have a 3-year-old, Ellie, who thinks she's a high schooler, but she goes to Indianola preschool. So we'll be here for the next at least 15, 20 years. So really excited to maybe do some work in this community.
And I'm Abby Huppenbauer. I'm an interior designer at Envision. Been there for about 5 years and love working on education projects. So thank you guys for having us here today.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about just what we're going to do tonight. Our goal follows what Art talked about. We're going to talk a little bit about you in terms of what we know and confirm that. The summary Art gave is a pretty good one for us. I want to talk about process a little bit in terms of how we might take you through this process. And then we really want to talk about our experience. We have a lot of different kinds of projects, and we wanted to bring some projects that we thought were really relevant for you that our team has done. And then Q&A. If you want to ask questions, interrupt us, and we'll stop at any time.
So we know that we're a community that has traditionally been pretty supportive of schools and school projects. We've had some successful bond referendums over the years. As a school board, you've done a good job of kind of piecing those out and doing it in a smaller approach instead of trying to go after really large bond projects. Your facilities, they're in really pretty good shape. Your middle school, we're at 20 years old there. You've done some really great work in elementary schools for safety and security projects. We know that kind of high school really needs to be addressed. It needs a vision, kind of a long-term vision for it, and also the facilities and maintenance building. We also know that kind of bond work in this community, you might be trying to hit a specific window. We've had a lot of stuff going on with the courthouse recently, and we know that the city is going after a large bond project maybe a few years out, so there's kind of a sweet spot of window that try to get a project in here now. And maybe there's a long-term plan for future work down the road. But kind of really at that kind of critical time. Similar to what Art said, our project understanding of what you're really looking to do. One is kind of a really efficient operations building. How can we provide a facility that allows staff to really support students in an efficient way? Consolidate some services, maybe take a few buildings offline, have a few less properties to manage. And how can we do that in a really kind of value-driven way so we have other dollars to spend on other projects? We also know that the community may not understand the need for that project at all. I drive by it all the time, and I see the buses parked there, but I would have no idea kind of what's in that building. So how do we let the community understand that and really kind of bring them along in the process and understand how those impact students and why it's really something you need to look at. We really look at that as bringing stakeholders in really early in the process, not just once we have a plan and a rendering to take to them, but really letting them help kind of set the vision and bringing them along really along the way. The other thing that we know is that the middle school has some work that needs to be done, and that the high school really needs kind of a long-term vision. There might only be kind of small projects that we look at right now, maybe just entry pieces. But we want to make sure what we do today doesn't block what you want to do in 10 years. So we're not making moves, is there going to be an ag or a CTE building? Are we going to move pieces around long term? And what does that mean for our projects today? So stepping back and doing a little bit of visioning for the high school so that we have that long-term plan. Also allows people that, everyone has their own interests. This person cares a lot about auditorium. This person cares a lot about athletic spaces. And letting them have a voice and to understand that their project might not be today, but it might be in 10 years, and that's how we're getting there with these projects today. Does this seem like the right kind of projects? I know you guys have gone through a prioritization as the board, but are those the projects that, does this feel right? Yeah. So we have a kind of a process to work through this. We have a 4-step process we go through at Envision. It's different for every project, but it always starts with discovery. We always start with asking the why behind a project before we dig in. Before we start drawing anything, we really want to understand kind of what the drivers are for the project and what the community is really looking for. It can be short, it can be long, it kind of depends on the project, and that's what we would want to talk to you guys about. But that's really about kind of January and February probably of 2021, really getting organized, going through your facilities assessment. You already did, you have a lot of information there, but starting to turn that then into a master plan of what you do long term. With the operations building, we can probably dig in and start figuring out right away kind of like how many offices, how many bays, what can we look at to really get that scope defined so we can get a dollar value associated with that. But then stepping back, and like we said, spending just a little time having that long-term vision for your other facilities, specifically the high school. Spend just a little time dreaming kind of in January and February. And then strategy, that's kind of March through July. That's where we're testing options. We're coming up with options, we're bringing them to you, or kind of whichever group you decide is going to really interact with the design team. Testing those, taking them out to the community, showing those options, and really spending some time making sure we have the right option. And then August and September is really kind of that reach out point for bonds. We know that making sure people know about the vote, understand how the questions answered is all really critical and leaving time for that. Then a vote in September, and then kind of move into the rest of design and construction. So our process is a little different with every district. Some districts want to spend years visioning. Other districts know exactly what they want to do and they're ready to go. And so we'll go through some stuff. It's not all right for you. We're really interested in figuring out what's right in our community here. But we always start with just trying to get organized. It's really important to understand who the decision makers are going to be. For example, is it always going to be the board? Do you want all the information to come to you? Or do you want a steering committee or a task force that goes through kind of the nitty-gritty pieces and then they just bring recommendations to you? What users are we going to meet with? Really quickly identifying kind of where you want to be for a budget threshold so we can talk about that really early on. And then just also having some bold kind of project drivers at the beginning so everyone has the same kind of checkpoints as we work through the project. Are we meeting these goals as we move through it?
And how are you doing some of that with COVID?
Oh, we got really good at Zoom really fast.
Just like you guys, right?
Yeah.
We got really good at that. We've been doing a lot of kind of community input sessions through Zoom and webinars, a lot of open surveys. Sometimes we just get on kind of open community forum meetings. We've done open houses at some communities that works where we're just there to answer questions as we go through. But it's a little different and it's changed, changes every day, just like how we deliver education.
What we do is very hands-on. So we've been using some technology that allows us to get feedback. There's some mural programs and some other programs that we utilize to still kind of simulate that kind of connectivity that we would get in a real room, like putting Post-its up on the wall and stuff like that. And so We've been pretty effective at reaching out and getting some of those new kind of technologies in place that allow us to still do those things and get some meaningful feedback.
I think also it's given us a venue. There's some people that would never feel comfortable showing up to a community meeting to express their opinion, but they're comfortable getting on a Zoom and sitting there and listening and participating in a survey. So while we might not be reaching some constituents, people that aren't okay with technology, we're working on how to do that through kind of hard copy surveys and newspaper articles. I think we've also found that we have kind of a bigger, broad outreach when we do things besides just big community meetings as well.
We've seen some really positive results it was a struggle to figure out how to do it. But we've really seen some positive results in terms of how many people we can reach in that process.
Okay.
One of the first things that we definitely want to look at is project budget, especially with a project like this that has kind of small projects within it. It's really important to quickly understand this isn't necessarily what your budget is. We don't know a specific budget. We know that I'm assuming this project will have a budget. We haven't found one yet that doesn't. So just understanding kind of how those buckets should be divided between the different pieces. It might be that one is the main priority, and so we're going to focus on that one, and whatever is left will get put into the other buckets. Or it might be that we want to very carefully make sure that we're evenly distributed between different schools. So then we need to make sure we don't have kind of skill creep happening, and this project gets a little bigger, and so now that's impacting everything else. So let's talk about budget early and often. We don't want to get to a point in a project where we have to make decisions on cutting big things at a milestone, so we like to talk about it, test the budget frequently as we go. We're going to dig in and look for a lot of kind of information right away. Like we said on the operations building, you're probably ready to have these conversations now, your staff, that we can dig in and really kind of understand the pieces and parts and get to kind of a square footage and cost for that pretty quickly. But with the middle school and maybe more specifically the high school, I think it's really good to kind of quickly dig in and look at how you're using the building. A lot of this is for the community member that drives by every day and sees it from the street. It looks like it did when they went to school there 20 or 30 years ago. Must be doing okay. I got a great education there, so it's fine for the students today. So it's really helping them to understand how we're using the building and how has education changed. So this is an example. This is from Cedar Falls High School. We were working on that, but just looking at a building that's 65 years old, 20% of what they were doing in that school wasn't even programming that existed, when they designed the school. Similar to your middle school, you're looking at trying to carve out small resource rooms, replace computer labs that maybe you're not using anymore. So really telling that story out in the community about how we don't want buildings to drive how we deliver education. It should be education driving how we use our buildings instead. We look at a lot of kind of benchmarks really early. We do a lot of work in the state of Iowa, so we have a lot of comparisons. You've done a lot of this work already in your facilities assessments. We wouldn't be saying go backwards. We do like to dig in and look kind of how are you using spaces. This is a really great example. We're working on Waverly Shell Rock spawn referendum right now. From the surface, their high school looked huge. They were at almost 250 square feet per student, and our kind of regional average is 225. But when we really dug in, I don't know if you know about Waverly Shell Rock, they have huge athletic facilities at their community. And that was actually really kind of skewing their numbers. Where they thought they had enough space, they had almost double the amount of athletic space. They have like Anthony Johnston level athletic facilities. But we could see that kind of kitchen commons, media, admin, those were all kind of small and underserved. And while those aren't part of their project today, that helped them to understand and helped us to work on a master plan where we knew that eventually we were going to need to address those things in the next 10 years. So how do we make sure that we don't block ourselves in from a future project that we might need to do?
We have a really good database of information from high schools in Iowa that we can quickly compare you to. And there might be reasons for those differences, as there are in every school. But we can very quickly kind of assess what you've got. You have some pretty high-level assessment right now, and this really is some good stuff that informs the master plan as we move forward without a lot of work going into it.
You know that specifically for the kind of operational building, we'll need to test sites. I think you've already maybe narrowed it down to a few sites, but I think it's really important in a project like this that's going to go out to the community to make sure you've tested a lot of options, that you've had a lot of conversations with community members, city, to really understand what all the options out there are, because if we don't test them now, the questions will come up later in a bond vote. People will say, well, why didn't you look at the trailer park next to the high school? Why didn't you look at this? And so we think that really kind of testing options quickly at the beginning for sites is really good. We like to go through and score those, so we'll look at kind of site size for future growth, how easy is it for bus drivers to access, How close is it to all of the schools? What's the delivery process like at that site? I think that's really good to do with different parties. So maybe admin is scoring it, we're scoring it from a design perspective, community members. This is really about being able to tell a story about why we selected the site we did when we go out and tell the story into the community. And then also, we talk a lot about numbers and data kind of at the beginning, but it's also about dreaming a little bit and having some of those qualitative goals for our project. So at the high school, this might be that we do some user group meetings for a week. We like to reach out kind of really quickly and broadly and, have a few hundred people that we talk to in a few days. It's really just about determining what is the future vision, what do we want our schools to be like here at long term, and how does that impact what we're doing today. All of this that we just talked about is really about building consensus, bringing the community along, starting with helping them define the needs, understand why we're addressing these projects. So by the time we have a plan and a rendering and we're going out, they've already kind of brain problem with that process, so they don't have so many questions about, well, why this? And in every community, this is different. Some, we're going out and meeting with lots of people. Others, this could be a smaller group. And that's really up to you guys as a board of how far you want your spread to be.
You guys have a sense of how much outreach, how much of that kind of outreach you want? Have you guys talked about that as a board?
I don't think
There's
specific to
gonna have
that.
to be a lot of outreach.
Okay.
For anything to pass, you need the outreach, yeah.
Well, as Laura said, it's different everywhere we go. I always like to say there are some superintendents that are socialists and others that are like, hardcore authoritarians,
Our community expects some communication with them
Yeah.
before, especially through everything, we've really hammered out the surveys of what people's thoughts are of how to return to school, what people's thoughts are on this, and so I would think we would continue with that same form of getting people involved.
There's not a wrong answer or right answer in that approach, but I think the answer that you're giving is the one that usually leads to the best results and a few surprises.
It is a supportive community. It's not the kind of community that has never had a bond issue, or that this would be the first vote yes ever. But as Sue was saying, it's a community that likes to be involved and informed too. So I think that the outreach would be important.
Good. Well, we prefer to work in a transparent environment like that, so that's good to hear.
And really, ultimately, it's about figuring out what matters in Indianola, what matters here. It's different, like we said, in every district. So this is, for example, is a really fast graph that for Waverly Shell Rock that was comprised of kind of 1,000 survey responses, multiple interviews with educators, task force members. But really, what they determined is that education and how they're building supported education is what should matter the most there. And they kind of ranked these different pieces. And that really just gave us a framework as we move forward with testing options and testing their existing facilities even. Well, how do your buildings support what you say matters the most here? So it's really about kind of building a community consensus on priorities.
So, that what you have right now is a facilities kind of assessment. It's not a master plan. And so, as Laura suggested earlier, we would encourage you to go through a very quick kind of planning process. This can take 2 weeks or it can take 2 years, as she said. But we would think, like, this is an example of a project where we did a master plan. They wanted to bite off their projects in small kind of chunks. We're on about phase 5 now of this project. They're maybe $5 million projects. A lot of them are nuts and bolts kind of projects that are roofs and windows and all those other things. But what we found is that we can make decisions about maybe a finish or a wall, that as we're doing those maintenance kind of nitty-gritty kind of things that we need to do, it can be informed by the broader master plan that we have in place. And so this is a very simple diagram, but it's how the school might expand, how it might connect in more meaningful ways. And it's something that we like to do just very quickly after we go through the process of discovery.
And then with that, we also take a closer look at the actual floor plan itself. And so, we really have a kit of parts that we utilize with our K through 12 education experience. And it's not just this pre-baked solution that we, apply district after district. And so we really work hard to find what the Indianola way is. This is a great example of a middle school that we are currently working on, where about 85% of the project was roof improvements and mechanical, electrical, and plumbing upgrades. And so a bulk of the community's dollars weren't really seen in the renovation. And throughout our discovery exercises, we really learned that we needed to provide the community with some impactful spaces that showed the community that we were making improvements to the teachers and the students. And so a way that we did that was, we learned through our discovery exercises that they really wanted this kind of co-learning, collaborative work zone within their academic wings. And so it was a really kind of small, impactful space, but it showed the community that their dollars were being spent in an informative way that benefited everyone. And so this is a rendering of that space. And so here you can see that, it was just a pretty simple solution, and that we were wise with our dollars, but still provided that 21st century learning experience for the students. And ultimately this helped gain consensus, and it was a positive vote. So this is also the time that we start to talk about finishes. We really like to work hand in hand with our maintenance teams to make sure that we are selecting the right solutions and budgeting properly, the right materials and finishes for the districts. We like to be challenged with new types of finishes, or stick with kind of the ones that you have that are tried and true. And so this, I think, shows a really nice example of an impactful space, but utilizing community's dollars impactfully. And then throughout strategy, we're still engaging with the community. So we'd still be having that broad community outreach that we had talked about a little bit earlier. And so we always say that, the more transparent that we can be, the more that you can get community unity. We like to say that we're better together. We all want to strive for, the same solution and ultimately have a successful vote. And so these are just some images of some workshops that we obviously had pre-COVID. That there is a 5-finger vote that we had at Cedar Falls High School. And then this was actually at a farmer's market for that same project. But these are some of the tools that we've actually done digitally and have been successful in using it with more of an online platform during these times. We can get more creative too if we want to put physical things up. So we're really flexible when it comes to engaging the community.
By September, we're going to be all back to normal, right?
We can dream
Awesome.
it.
All right.
As we're kind of taking those solutions out, everyone likes to see pretty renderings and what the project is going to look like, but we think it's also really important to share kind of the information so that the community can make their own decisions. So we also do a lot of kind of simple graphics like this that take something like how do we build a project cost in a district. So this shows you that you could do just a GO bond or a GO bond and a voted PEPL, or you can make it really complicated. This project could be anywhere from $30 to $70 million. But show the community kind of how that works, and also show them what the tax change is for them. So I know that you're not necessarily looking at something this complicated, but it's really just about showing information and letting the community make their own decisions. We eventually, in the last kind of few months, we really do hit the ground running and take images and plans out there. It's about having a lot of conversations, kind of making sure everyone's questions are answered before the bond vote comes up. It can be through social media, presentations, just making sure that their questions are answered is really what we see. But like I said, really the most effective bond referendum votes we see are ones that we start engaging the community and telling a story of need much earlier than we have a project defined that we're taking out to them. And then we do real projects too. We don't just do bond referendums and planning work. As a project has a successful vote, then we move into kind of the actual design, the final kind of design and documentation phase. We really like to make sure that we bring clients along the way. We use a lot of virtual reality and kind of walking people through spaces. We see this is really helpful with community members and teachers specifically. We can sit them in their space, we can walk them through it, we can move pieces around with them. And it's a lot easier than asking them to look at a 2D plan and say, this is something I look at every day and I understand, but this is what you want, right? So we try to walk them through it, and this has been really successful since we've gone digitally.
I'll tell you that even if teachers say that they understand plans, they don't. You learn anything, and that's true for not just teachers, it's everyone. We did a test a few years ago, showing a plan to a group of teachers, and they all agreed to what they wanted. And then we showed them the 3D stuff after it. And they're like, well, no, we don't want that. We want to do this. And so these tools are really important and something we've been developing over the last decade pretty hard.
Also have a pretty stout quality control and assurance program that we go through. We do a lot of 3D BIM coordination with our consultants, and what this really means to you is that we're trying to coordinate as many things as we can before we get out to the field, which means low change order dollars. So that's really always our goal, is to have as low of a change order dollar as possible. So we go through quite a few systems, a lot of coordination, a lot of project team communication early on, with the goal of getting it all coordinated before documents ever even hit the streets. And lastly, when things do come up, we find that kind of weekly touch points are really the best. So this might be myself and Art and Bernie, once a week, just having a 15-minute conversation through design, saying, what are we working on this week? What information do you need from me? Am I holding anything up? What information do I need from you? And let's move on. And so we find that can solve most of the problems that we go through in design in a really efficient touch point manner.
All right, so we want to go through a few projects. Like I said, we have a lot of projects. We try to pick the ones that we thought were most relevant to some of the issues that you're having with your facilities. So we're going to go through those quickly. So one of the things that Bernie mentioned in our walkthrough is just that common space is inadequate at the gym and the theater. And then there's really no kind of sense of arrival as well. And so we're going to show you a few projects that we've addressed that in a similar kind of way. The first one, this is the Waterloo Career Center. This is a project, a new program for a district that we work with. And they really they had this kind of bunker. And it's concrete and brick with all elements. And about 95% of this about 95% of this project is renovation. But they really wanted to make an impact on visually how people perceive the space, because their stadium is just to the right of that image. And so a lot of people would see it. And so they really wanted to make kind of a wow statement with a very simple kind of new addition and modification to the front. So this is where we are. This project wrapped up about a year and a half ago. This is about a 2,000 square foot addition to this building. Pretty minor, but we started to treat this space as a more transparent kind of image that's more accessible. We have some outdoor space that's kind of related to the stadium. We have actually the culinary lab is right inside the front door, so that acts as a community space for games, but also just a lot of different kind of community aspects programming. A lot of tired classrooms. This is pretty indicative of all of the spaces inside, that 95% renovation that we had. They really wanted to challenge this idea of 21st century learning and what does it look like, how can it change. There was a whole lot of ceiling tiles, a whole lot of carpet that was wet, and roof leaks and all those things you can see in the image. So what we started to do was really kind of transparency was important. They really wanted to see learning on display. They wanted to see kids doing things. Again, this is career and technical education, so they wanted to see what was going on. And so the creation of these kind of learning communities, these kind of small meeting spaces for collaboration. So collaboration is a huge component of this project and what we see for 21st century learning. Really what we did to this space is we took out the ceilings. We created more volume. We were very strategic with the systems placement so that we got that volume, but we still could route everything. We took out the carpet. We ground the concrete floors. We put up some more durable materials. This is a weathering steel product, actually, that's sealed inside. It's much more durable than the original building was, and certainly is a much nicer kind of environment for kids to learn. This is inside the front door. This was actually labeled the girls' gym on the floor plans, which I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently it was in the day. So we had some nice volume here, but it was really tired space right inside the front door. So we really modified the structure of this kind of front wall, and this became the commons and kind of culinary area as we developed it. And so this is kind of inside the front door, welcoming kind of front lobby. Graphics reporting and branding, really important in the space. So some very simple kind of wall covering, to give a pop from the outside and the inside when you come in. But again, very simple kind of space with some strategic interventions as we move forward here. This is a space back in the heart of that building. Again, there were no windows, and the building is kind of a thick, kind of big building. And so very strategically, there was a structural bay in the center that was distinct from everything else. We took out the floor without impacting any of the structural walls, put some skylights in above. We really wanted to connect vertically these spaces. So you come in, and we had to get where a lot of the programming is on the upper level, but we wanted this kind of meaningful. We call this the heart space, where students collaborate. We have high bay kind of labs down below, and then kind of low bay labs up above on the top. So this is kind of the connector that pulls everything together vertically.
And then this is Hudson Elementary. So this is part of that 5-phased master program that Brad was talking about. So this is just one piece of that pie. But this school specifically had a very similar condition where they didn't have a super informed front entry, right? And so locating that and creating more of a community entry was high on their importance list, and also security. And so what we did for them is really reimagine that front entry, and we located an addition off the face of the building there. We have a secure entry with admin support offices in the front there. And then we also expanded their common space. And so this is now a really warm community entry that, it really connects their elementary school and their middle school and kind of creates the central heart of the building. And so that central heart of the building is, this is their existing common space or cafeteria. Again, kind of a tired looking space. But there is a lot of existing elements that needed to remain in place. And this is a rendering of basically from right inside that front door that you would see. So you can see off to the left there, the administration area and a more secured entry. And then really connecting shared resources throughout the school, like a media center, and creating a central hub and that warm community entry that the school district was looking at. We also touched on, some pretty impactful finishes. Acoustics were a big issue here, so the artful ceiling element and stripes that you see are actually multi-purpose. They have some acoustic property and also provide a bold impact as well.
We don't have final images of this because of COVID. It just opened up. But the photo looks pretty much exactly like the rendering.
Do you see, like, when there's places like that, that it gets used a lot by kids before and after school and all that? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kind
of an obvious question, but yeah.
They have a before school breakfast program here.
Okay.
This space actually links, in that school, there's a middle school and the elementary school are connected. And so it's kind of that connected between, but they have the high school gym at the end of it. And so it's kind of an important community commons that also serves, in a school, everything's multi-purpose, right? And the challenge is kind of where you pull the line in those spaces. But this serves a lot of different functions, new concession kind of component here. They really want it to be a strong kind of community core space, and the community uses the space after hours. It's really a lot of multi-purpose.
And then we also wanted to touch on your athletic entry and talk about some things that we're implementing that we're hearing from other districts and that we're exploring and that we're hearing from students. And so obviously your entry is very trophy case heavy. And throughout other facilities, we're starting to learn of new opportunities to start to display this really great information and these student successes. Cedar Falls High School is currently a project that we're working on. It's currently out to bid, and this is a new build. And so you can see here, again, similar condition where we have a warm community welcoming entry. It's serving as kind of that front porch atmosphere to the community. And right as you enter the building, it's really showcasing Cedar Falls or Tiger Pride. This specific instance, you can see off to the right, we still have, trophy cases and an opportunity for artifacts. But what this is really about here is we're starting to layer graphics and more digital displays so that we can allow for flexibility over the next 50 years. And swap things out as more student successes come in. This wall specifically was dedicated to support all student successes, but it can certainly be dedicated towards athletics. And so we wanted to make sure, we talked to students and they would say, well, I went to this gym and I saw this, this would be really cool. And so we took all that information that we heard during discovery, during strategy, and implemented it to one pretty successful solution for them here.
Another place that we're doing kind of a lot of master planning is we've been doing master planning for Drake Athletics for really the last 10 years. And as part of that, this is their basketball practice facility that was added on to the NAP Center, which was supposed to just be 2 practice gyms. And in the original master plan, it was just going to be an addition off kind of the backside. That site didn't work, it had a lot of challenges, and so we challenged them to think of this maybe on more of the public side of the NAP Center. It gave them the opportunity to not just do practice gyms, but also have this kind of new VIP donor entry piece, which was a really small part of it, but really challenged them to find the opportunity. And so now it's kind of this new branded entry for them with a project that maybe that wasn't really the initial goal of the project. We do a lot of these kind of spaces, specifically in collegiate. We know it's a lot about branding, history, pride, and that wow moment when you walk in. And we also know that high schoolers are starting to expect more and more of this. They expect the college experience at their high school, and we can provide a lot of that in really simple ways. I'm sure you all know this. I showed this image to my husband, who graduated in 2020, and went, oh, it looks exactly the same. And this is what most of the high schools in Iowa, the same kind of corridors that you've always seen. We have another project. This is in Olmine right now. And this is actually an elementary school, but really similar. You can see really utilitarian hallways. They had a lot of interior classrooms that they were dealing with. So what their biggest priority was to move all of their classrooms to exterior walls. And what did that mean for us to have to shuffle pieces around it? So you can see here, this is kind of that reimagined. So we took all their interior classrooms and moved them kind of to the exterior walls, have a small classroom addition, but really here we thought what that middle space wanted to be. So here it happens to be a media center and collaboration core, which works really well in elementary. You can see we're not doing a lot of different finishes, all kind of really utilitarian, but have this kind of really big impact within an existing footprint. We don't have to do new build to have this. We also challenge them to rethink lockers, which are a huge thing in schools, especially in high school. We see that a lot of times kids aren't even using their lockers or not. It kind of depends on each district, but here we rethought them and kind of pulled them down to elementary school. That made sense here. But in Cedar Falls, we're looking at, what did 10% of the kids even knew where their locker were at Cedar Falls High School?
Yeah. It was funny because we asked how many they used their lockers, and then there was another follow-up question of, do you even know where your locker is?
They just carry it on their backpack.
They just don't know.
I think Johnson's new facility.
Yeah.
They have like a corner for lockers.
Yeah. And what that does is it frees up a lot of opportunities because the lockers will drive the space. They drive the spaces that you have right now in terms of corridors with lockers and solid walls. And so what it does for us is allows us to create some of these kinds of spaces pretty easily within your existing footprint.
We also have a lot of kind of work we do outside of education. This is one from one of our healthcare projects. I don't know if you've ever been. This is Mercy. I think it's in Clive or West Des Moines, kind of at that knuckle. And we were challenged with this really brutalist early 90s building with some beautiful blue panels on it and a lot of brick. And we were challenged to rethink kind of the first women's health center in the state of Iowa. So this was a center that women would come for all of their healthcare needs. And so how can we take this brutal building and really give it a soft and welcoming entry point on the front of it? So you can see just kind of a simple move. This isn't a very big addition, but really kind of rethought what the front entry was to this building to make it really welcoming.
All right, I'm going to go through these quickly because we really want to get to Q&A. This is a project where we were going to build a new building, and we decided through our discovery process that they really wanted to improve the entrance to the whole campus. And they had these 2 separate buildings with pretty weak entrances, you can see. And so we ended up thinking about the building as a connector and rather than a standalone building, that became an entrance for the whole campus rather than just those individual buildings. And what it did was create kind of this linkage, is similar to what you're talking about doing, is provide some resources that can support a couple different kinds of spaces. So this kind of resource area, lounge, classrooms kind of support both the buildings to the side as well as the addition that we had. We do a lot of kind of utilitarian buildings, you know, those service kind of buildings that you're talking about doing. This is an example of one, you know, but generally they're the same, right? They combine some kind of storage, they provide vehicle storage, they provide maintenance in some way. They can be really simple kind of buildings. This one's actually LEED certified, but it's about $107 a square foot building when it was built. Very utilitarian. Daylight's important, so we try and get daylight in these spaces, even in these kinds of rooms. Entry and how supervision happens is super important in these buildings because you've got a lot of space that maybe you can't see, and that's when trouble happens. So how we kind of have visibility to the front of house visitors and back of house kind of staff is really important. Really flexible spaces, you know, a lot of them are free span kind of spaces because what we know about these buildings is they change and the needs change. So this is a maintenance kind of version of it. On the other side of the wall, there's a wall, that wall can come out, and there's just vehicle storage. So those buildings need to adapt over time to different kind of needs. You know, we show you these sexy images, but you know, a lot of them are just simple kind of no-nonsense buildings, right? They're clean, they can still be nicely done, but they really need to be nuts and bolts. And, you know, we again show you the kind of really nice images, but a lot of spaces in buildings like this just look like this, right? There's a lot of that we do. And so where we use design is really important. Where we don't use it is really important. All right, with that, we're going to shut up because we've talked long enough. We can go all night if you want to stick around, but we really want to get some Q&A here.
I've got kind of a question that I don't so much directed at them, but just a general question. You know, like the high school was built as a middle school attached to an existing high school, and so the flow is totally like that on purpose. And now it's all high school, and so you get these weird things you have to, you know, drop breadcrumbs to remember where you're going.
Yeah, you can't understand it unless you think about it in terms of wings.
Yeah.
If you just went in and thought of it as one building, there's so many nooks and crannies, and yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just kind of curious, like, are we thinking, and I guess your question to you is like the expertise, I mean, are we thinking that we would consider looking at the flow of the high school? And then, you know, maybe it's as simple as saying, oh, if we put these classrooms instead of here, over here, are we thinking to improve the flow also, even if it's just moving classrooms around, or is this project just kind of looking at entrances or we don't know yet?
Well, I don't think we know yet. I mean, that'd probably be part of the visioning. I think a comment they made earlier is really important too, that we don't want to do anything now, like with an entrance, that would inhibit, you know, some efficiency or some improvement later somewhere else. So I don't think we know. I think we just, and I don't want to speak for everybody, maybe somebody here has it all figured out, but we just know that it's sort of a dated Frankenstein kind of a building. You know, there are probably a lot of different things you could do.
I would say that Career Center project that we showed you, very similar kind of building actually. There was no logic to it whatsoever. It was all over the place. And so what we did in the master plan was made a very simple kind of long-term move of developing what we call Main Street, which is a kind of connector, which took out some walls to allow it to make sense to people when they come in, that it was a much cleaner, because what happens to buildings over time is they get messy. And so that allowed us to really make a simple kind of circulation move through the building, and also plan for the future. So we are currently doing the other half of the building, renovating right now, and building an addition. And all of that kind of works within that framework. And so it all kind of comes down to that. It builds on that simple goal that we started with, which was to clean all that stuff up.
Do you have any examples, or have you guys you've worked with all size school districts. Have you had to work with centralized food storage and refrigeration?
We have. We're working, I'm trying to think which one's the best example. Cedar Falls High School is a good example. We did some studies for them about centralizing their operations. And originally they were looking at a new building just for that purpose. And we did some studies of that. They were also working on the high school at the time, so in the end, we kind of pulled that into the high school. And so that's part of the high school operations, is their central kitchen, storage, all of those kinds of things, food prep. And that's evolved over the last few years from, and Art, you've seen, the food service changes every 5 years, it seems like, in terms of, are we doing really minimal kind of, we're shipping everything out, and it just gets delivered warm and you plate it up and it's good to go, versus how much are we prepping on site. And it's a quality kind of economy kind of discussion that we can kind of help you with, and your food service consultants can help us with that as well. I would say there's a shift back to kind of quality. While you can save more money by that central kind of location, there are some real advantages to pushing some of that stuff out and having it be a better quality at the source. Now there are simple moves like we might be making all of our hamburger at the central kind of place, but it gets shipped out and maybe gets mixed together with other stuff at the individual sites. So those are things that we just need to understand. Have you guys done a study really of your food service operations?
John, I don't know that we have specifically food service, have we? Done a study of just food service?
No, we haven't.
So that could be a part of it if you want, but it certainly doesn't have to be. But we have been through those.
I did have a second question. Living through COVID like we are there innovations, new things you're doing with air ventilation systems in rooms, buildings? Open-ended question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ventilation, one, would be nice to have, because you probably don't have that in a lot of your building. But there are lots of different kinds of systems. There's some conventional systems that'll get you that. Whether we have operable windows or not is a whole discussion, right? Because there's allergies and all those kinds of things that work against each other. Yeah, there's displacement systems, that are really good for ventilation. But really, most of our projects that we're seeing have dedicated outside air, which is really the answer that we would see in most projects. We really need to get to that. And that's tough in an existing building, but we've done that in these projects that you've seen. Other thoughts, images, or anything that you thought about as we were going through?
What would you want to leave the board with in terms of what your identity is, what distinguishes you, what they remember?
That's a great lead-in, Art. Good job. We really want to leave you with why Envision. You're going to talk to 3 firms, and there's a lot of things that we do the same. I think the big thing is, one of the things is we're really interested in understanding the Indianola way. We do a lot of work, we have a lot of tools that we use, but it's never the same in every district. And we want to make sure we use the right ones here, and we go through the right process here. And so really digging in and understanding, the way for here matters to us. The next one is, we showed you a lot of really pretty images today, but to us, design doesn't have to cost more, and on these projects, it doesn't cost more. And we really think of that as just taking a little more time to have a creative solution and plan the project correctly. It doesn't mean we're spending more dollars in those solutions. We're really good at reimagining what you have. Hopefully you saw that in our images today. That's something that we really pride ourselves on. We don't do a ton of new builds. And like Brad said at the beginning, we kind of love the challenges of existing structures. So that's something we do really well. We have a lot of experience in the kind of projects that you're looking at. And the experience is this team. Our team in these offices, we're doing these projects, and we're the people you're going to see all the way through the project. The last thing is we're here. This is, passionate for us. We're close to here. This is my community. My kids are going to go here, and these are also my tax dollars. So I really want to be kind of that point of contact for you as we move forward. See my kids go to school here. Hopefully, they'll always look a little different by the time they get there.
I think one other thing that kind of, as we talked, came to me was, I know you've worked with the other 2 firms, in some capacity over the last few years. I think that we can bring a fresh perspective to this. That. as we're walking through with Bernie. It needs something different. And so we're not here to just apply something, but we'd like to take a fresh look at what you have and kind of reimagine what it could be. All right, we've got about 7 minutes left. We still have time for some questions. I hate to leave 7 minutes on the table, but what other thoughts? What concerns you guys as a group? As you go through, think about this process, you have some new board members that maybe haven't been through this process before. Is that accurate, Mary?
I think, yeah, that is true. Yep.
What
I would say my concern is, and that's part of the reason we're kind of grouping this together, but my concern is none of this, if you get to that part of the public that says we don't need it, it's like, do we need a new entrance? Do we need a new barn? Do we need it, it's just not quite the same as saying, yes, we need a new elementary school.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that selling why we need it, or, do they need a nice lobby? Well, yeah, they would. I mean, just the selling and education of the general public, probably the people that show up and help the process is fine, but how do you get that message out to the larger group? Because it just isn't as obvious as some other projects that you could do.
Yeah. So the lobbies, to that point, always seems like extra space, right? But I think we've found it most successful when you sell it as a community space, right? That there's spaces that the community, this is a community building, right? And so there's spaces that we have to design that allow it to be used. We have had projects where we design spaces like that, and you might think that initially, but there might be lunch going on, there might be a gym space going on, but there might also be yoga going on the weekend in that space. And part of that is just how you kind of discuss that, how you talk about it.
Okay, I'm thinking of them as learning spaces. We know you're not going to go through and do a full gut and remodel the whole entire high school. So where can we find those small opportunities to make a big impact, provide some of these different kind of 21st century learning spaces? So one might be right at the front door entry, rethinking media and that whole heart and room. That could have a huge impact on students and kind of the way that we're able to provide them spaces outside of the classrooms, which we see are more and more important kind of in education. So selling those also as spaces that aren't just pretty pictures.
I think to the service building, that's another challenge, because no one wants to buy that, right? But I think you got to explain and tell a story about growth. You've had growth in other areas. That these are essential kind of operations, that impact everything else. We find food service drives the school day calendar, in most schools. And so operationally, what can it do for us? Academically, what can it do for us? We just have to kind of, as a group, come up with those stories and talk about, hey, we're spending this much in 5 different facilities maybe to do this. Here's what it would do to us operationally to allow us to be more efficient and accommodate the growth that we've seen in every other aspect of facilities that we've had.
I think also telling the story of why you're choosing to do this project as a bond referendum and not use, save dollars or something like that. I'm trying to make good decisions for the future to keep us in a good financial place so that if the heating or cooling system goes out, that you have dollars available. And also just the work that you've done to bring kind of the tax levy rate down. I think those are really important pieces to go out and tell the story why this is the kind of financial model that you're looking at for these projects.
That is the question as you think about it, so I think you're right on. What other concerns do you guys have?
Well, you've addressed my concern, because one of the problems we've had, been involved in a long time, is the high school. And a new high school is 100 to 130 million for a school our size. We don't have
the
the
exact
bonding.
same size as Cedar Falls. It's
Yeah,
about
we don't have the bonding
$112
capacity.
million.
We don't have the bonding capacity for that, nor do I think we could pass it.
Yeah.
So the question is, what's the vision of the high school that we can work towards over time? Because I never see a new one.
Pretty rare.
Not gonna grow that much, I don't think, so.
I think it's a lot of out-of-the-box thinking too. Reimagining, like you said, we gotta come up with designs, not the same old thing we're seeing all the time. Something new and free-flowing, and students are gonna buy on, the community's gonna buy on, teachers. So I think it's gotta be out-of-the-box thinking when we do this.
You can capture people's imagination. You think about it thoughtfully, thinking about how it could happen, how we get there. without taxing them, into the ground, especially in this environment. I think it's really cool. I mean, there's a lot of people hurting out there. So I think it tells a responsible story if we tell it right.
I have something nagging me from the middle school gym, that we had to keep track of how much was public use versus private use, and which way was it that you had to be careful with?
You've got to be under 10% private use. We have very little private use. We have facility rentals, but that was related to bonds, right, Jonna? That's some reporting you have to do.
If you have a bond, if you have a tax exempt bond, you can't let a for-profit company come in and use it for more than 10% of the time.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Just kind of remember that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any other big concerns or things you're hearing in the community that are concerns?
I just, because people don't know that building, you don't know it, I don't know it. And so to sell this idea, we would need to make the community aware of all the, problems and challenges of that building, and then, what it could be, and then, just show some examples of what it could be for the new entrances. And I think people need to see it.
Yeah, and I think as a district, we have really great support staff, wonderful food service department, wonderful transportation department, and I bet there are a lot of people who don't know what they have to work with, in terms of that space. It's really incredible how well they maintain our buses, for example, with what they have to work with. So, that will be part of the storytelling, I think, for sure.
I think you have to tell the story. Yeah, exactly. Tell the story.
It's all about telling the story and being transparent with people's questions and the answers that you give.
I don't think a lot of people know. I know when Sue and I took donuts over there, I had no idea what they had to work with at the bus barn to replace seat belts and that kind of stuff. I really opened my eyes.
I think it all just goes back between the food and transportation is our safety component. It may not be the security cameras that are sitting in our hallways, but transportation, I'd say, is pretty high up on our safety concern for our families, as well as food safety. That's a huge thing. And so I think the way we communicate it is really going to be the thing, but if safety of our kids on buses and with food is not a high priority, then we have some major revamping to do.
Yeah, a lot of it's just, to Art's point, people don't know. Most of your voters don't know.
They don't.
And even the parents don't know. Because they come in the front door, and that's as deep as they go in the building. We had one project where we pretty strategically had parent-teacher conferences at the back of the building. And we made people go through the building for a whole year. And they were kind of upset about it because they had to find their way to it. And it's almost, it's really difficult. But you can make some moves like that help the story, right? They have to go past the front door, and then they interact with it, and they see it, and they're forced to kind of see what you're dealing with every day. All right, I think we're out of time. So we really appreciate the opportunity. We would love to work for you, with you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you.
I'm going to leave the recording running. Just to remind everybody, so if you need to stand and stretch, fine, but we're still on the air as we get the next group ready to go. So.
Didn't mean to leave a presentation. Apparently we had a Play-Doh issue at home. My daughter has to make like a cell model, right? So she had it all ready. And she's like, where's the plan? So she's sending me all these pictures on my phone. I'm like, that box right there. And I'm like, so I get her on FaceTime. I'm like, go downstairs. She's like, what is it? I'm like, it's a shoebox. Shoebox. It says Play-Doh on it. I see my husband looking around. I was like, it's right there. And they're picking every box by it.
I was like,
I thought you were going to say
she's got a
and then she pulls out this brand new packet of Play-Doh. I was like, that was a Christmas gift. Yes, just use it. So I apologize. I figured I was not getting anywhere with it.
I hope I didn't get too close.
Oh, no, you're okay. You're okay.
Yes, I thought so, because I was like, I helped with the Heal House, so I was down doing an intake on a student, so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm missing that meeting. So yeah, I was hoping I was gonna make yours, because I was like, oh, I gotta go see this one. Yeah, so. Oh, Cool, nice to meet you. I know they've been telling me everything.
Wouldn't it be nice to kind of wipe out the line?
Oh my gosh.
That whole center section and just do
loves
something
it.
different with it?
She loves it.
And just have it not be like
So I'm
four
excited.
turns before you get to the other part?
So it'll be
I think
fun.
all you need is plug in.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was late. Yeah, I figured I'd.
You want to, yeah, go ahead. Sure. Is that okay? I'll use some handouts.
I want to touch them, you don't have to.
That's okay, that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There's a place for notes in the front, and if you want, and there's nothing else that we're really going to.
You want for art?
Oh, sorry, yeah, there's one right behind you.
Just by way of introduction too, I'll just mention for everybody kind of the conversation we had and what we hope to get out of you guys tonight. We have Chris and Michael from Shive Hattery. We talked about the fact that the board has discussed having a possible bond issue in September. We have no concrete plans or budget yet, of course. Well, we've kind of talked about known priorities like our auxiliary services building for food service and transportation, buildings and grounds, technology, and central receiving. We've talked about the need for a little more identity and updating at the high school. And two areas in particular we talked about were the gym, auditorium area, the entrance area, possibly new combined entrance. We also talked about on the south side here, potentially bumping the media center out, creating some gathering space for students and maybe backfilling with some classrooms. And we talked about potential for a little bit more classroom space at the middle school, potentially taking what was an old computer lab now is one large classroom and then maybe bumping out in the media center, creating some classrooms. So those were things that came out of our board work session. And you certainly don't have to just focus on those things, but we hope tonight that you'll give the board, some idea of your philosophy and approach and the identity of Shive Hattery and any similar jobs you've done, and then have time for questions and answers too. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. What is the, some are wearing masks, some are not. What, is there a protocol?
Your comfort level, we are distanced enough that it's really what your comfort level is. That's how we kind of leave it here, so.
I can leave. Do you trust a person behind a mask who's talking? I really want to earn your trust, but I don't know if that's a little hard to do when I'm behind a mask.
And take it off if you feel like you need to. I mean, it's
Whatever works for you, really.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, and I'll put it back on as soon as I'm done. My name is Chris Nelson, and this is Michael Kleen, and we are Shive Hattery. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here tonight. We did put together an agenda that's above me right now, and that agenda, we can throw that out as easily as we can, any plans before the pandemic hit. We can take this agenda, rewrite it a different way. We want to make sure we're getting to your answering your questions, whatever they might be specifically. We did come prepared to talk about our process. We did come prepared with really a statement of qualifications called an SOQ in front of you. That really has a lot of other projects. We didn't think we were going to be here if we weren't qualified to be here, so we weren't going to talk an awful lot about all the projects, but if you have a question about one, we sure want to address it. We do have a Q&A at the end, but we prefer you actually ask the questions anytime. We'd rather you interrupt us if you're comfortable doing that, and so that we can try to get to those issues first. Or we just don't want anything unresolved in the 60 minutes, and maybe we can do it in even less than 60 minutes. Get us back on schedule. So with that, we will be asking you a question about projects in general, saying, well, how do you define success for a project? We need to know that before we can talk about success. How do you define success? And we're hoping one or maybe two of you has an idea. If you have trouble thinking about one, you might think about a home project you may have had and how you would define success for remodeling a kitchen, a bathroom, something like that. It might have to do with price, schedule, it might have to do with something you surprise us with, and that's what we want to know. How do you define success? We'll ask that question a little bit later. So with that, we'll just, we'll move right along then. We do know a lot about you. Actually, that sounds a little creepy. We know a lot about your buildings. We know a lot about your school buildings. And we want to just tell you a little bit more about us. So the slide you see up there, I'm an engineer. I love numbers. I only needed 3, 2, and 1 to be able to tell you enough about myself. I have 3 daughters. I have 2 grandchildren. I have 1 mother-in-law. And I also have 1 wife that comes with that mother-in-law. And I will tell you that one of my daughters is a teacher. My wife is also a teacher. I love to hear the concerns, the good days, and sometimes there are bad days. No doubt you get to hear that too from teachers. But it's a wonderful profession, and of course we highly respect it in our family. The number, if you take 2 and 3 together, 23. 23 is how many years that I've been doing work down here in the school district. It was back in Irving Elementary, back in 1997. And we were invited by Dr. Narek and Darcy Moeller. And we came down, and the rest is history. We made very, very good friends with them, great relationships, and still to this day with Dr. Narek. If you look at the numbers 32, well, that's how long I've been married to my 1 wife. And if you look at the number 1, I am still at my first job out of college. And I know that I look old, but I'm still just right at my first job, so we have to trust me on that. Michael.
Yes, I don't know how I can lead off with that. Anyway, my name is Michael Kleen. For those who don't know me, I live here in Indianola. My wife is Stacia Weinman, and this is my family. And some neat things about this is Mr. Pluto is Callan. He's in the 3rd grade. Bergen is a kindergartner, and those both boys are at Irving. The little girl next to the little boy is Kerrigan, who is turning 3 tomorrow morning. Some neat things about this is I always think about the proud traditions, unlimited possibilities. So one of the proud traditions our family is all 9 of those children in that photograph are Indianola, are 5th generation Indianola students, or will be Indianola students. So you have Callan, you have Stacia, you have Joe, you have Jim Weinman, and then you have Harry, who is Jim's dad. So those 5 generations are all graduates or will be graduates of the school system. You also have my wife, who's a teacher, and eventually when Kerrigan is school-aged, most likely Stacia will start subbing at Irving and some of the other elementary schools. You have my mother-in-law, Karen, who actually taught for the school district, ironically, in the basement of the First Ned Methodist Church, way back when. And then you also see Monica, my sister-in-law, and then you probably know Joe and Scott from the insurance company here in town. Wanted to point this out is, I am very family-centered, and I basically have a community of myself, and I've always been driven to help the community outside of just my own personal family. When was looking for a new career change, working for a new firm, Shive Hattery actually focuses their employees on getting back to the communities that they live in. And so within 6 months of me joining Shive Hattery, I actually joined the Rotary Club of Indianola. Coming next year, I'll be the president of the club for the 21-22 school year. So you'll see me, helping pass out the 3rd grade dictionaries. You'll see me yelling out Rotary Food Drive during the parade, and then you'll also see me parking cars. So, besides the fact that we're community-driven, Shive Hattery also acknowledges that I am a lifelong learner. As an education architect, I have dedicated most of my life to focusing on school projects, especially K-12 public schools. And so when there's an opportunity for me to go to a conference or to attend something that's a little bit higher level, Shive Hattery will easily help me, support me in whatever ways they can so that I can attend. So just a few weeks ago, I attended an international conference virtually from the comfort of my porch and got to attend a 3-day conference talking about education and facilities and how the design of a space really affects the student achievement, whether it's for the homeless, whether it's for students with special needs, you name it. There was a segment where I could learn about where I can advance my education on these topics.
So a little bit about Shive Hattery. We have been around for 125 years. And in fact, we were all geared up to do a nice big celebration this summer. We thought that was a milestone to reach that we'd want to celebrate, and we've postponed that. We don't know when that'll happen. A soft date is going to be in probably June or July. But we're pretty proud of that, to be around for a long, long time. 50 years in the Des Moines area, and if I had another number up there, it'd be 23 years with the Indianola Community School District.
Going to throw a pop quiz at you. There is a Indianola connection to Shive Hattery besides myself. Does anyone know that connection? Going to take that as a no. That connection is Orr & Sons. So you may remember the furniture store on the square. Well, one of the sons in Orr & Sons had a daughter, Mary Lou, and she married Don Hattery, who is a second generation civil engineer. So that's the random connection. So growing up, living on North Buxton, I found out that Mary grew up one block over on North B. So it's just kind of neat little factoid.
There are no points for that, though, so
Yeah.
don't worry.
I grew up on North B Street.
Okay.
You got points for me.
Did you know her?
I knew Oars.
Okay,
Yeah.
no worries. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I know that they're just amazing people. As far as I know, that Don is still alive and so happens. But any other questions? Because we do love the questions. Oh, well, can you go back that slide? I would like to just make a statement about our building there. We do have over 110 people in this office. We have mechanical engineers, we have architects, we have structural engineers, electrical. We have it all under one roof. What is kind of neat about the building that we reside in right now is that it was empty for 8 years. People couldn't figure out what to do with that building. It was absolutely abandoned. It was the old Wall Street Journal printing facility. There were absolutely no windows in it, so we knocked out a lot of walls to see what you see today. But our architects looked at it and said, this can be such a collaborative space. This can be an incredibly collaborative space, and it is, to get all those different types of disciplines coming together under one roof to be able to work through problems. It has really facilitated in successful project management. Next slide, please.
Okay. So as Chris has mentioned, Chris has been working for 23 years. Well, 23 years ago, I was in 7th grade. I don't think I was even interested in being an architect back then. I don't think that started in freshman year, so.
Well, that makes me feel older, thank you. The timeline here it does go back to 23 years and over 70 projects. We didn't list all 70 projects here, but there are a few projects we would like to highlight, the ones that are in blue. And going from left to right, that original project, we came down, Irving Elementary. I got to add cooling to a building that was never designed for air conditioning. Okay, it was just a heated-only building with steam heat at the time. And we came down, we worked through some issues, and one of the unique things or challenges about that building is it had very old, big, tall windows, and when we looked at it from a holistic view, a view from more than just the architect or more than just the electrical engineer or the mechanical, we looked and we saw that we were able to reduce cooling. Every classroom was about maybe this size, 900 square feet, which requires about 5 tons of cooling. We could reduce 1 ton of cooling if we just replaced the windows with energy-efficient windows. And so by being able to save first cost 20% on that was a huge benefit to the school district that continues to give in the way of thermal comfort and energy savings. So it was one of the projects that I remember back then. About 3-4 years later, 2003, we changed the air conditioning in the high school. And the unique thing about that is we had about $6.5 million worth of construction costs that we needed to take care of. And that was too much for one summer. So we broke up basically the south half of the school, putting in a central plant and new chillers, nice, beautiful. You've got beautiful 420-ton train chillers in there that are just, they're just massive, but they're just wonderfully, they're just great. And we broke that up into 2 projects over 2 summers. So phasing can sometimes be a huge part of any project, any construction. And in schools, it really lends itself, it's really more of it can be a barrier to getting a project done because of the only having a 3-month window to do a lot of construction. So.
Then just wanted to point out that back in 2018, almost a few days ago, 2017, I signed and sealed the drawings for this building that we're in. Then in 2018, it was under construction, and you guys moved in roughly in December of 2018. So we know your buildings. I think some of you may have seen this document before, but you can see how the high school is more than just a high school. It is a school with addition and addition and addition applied to it. We know your buildings from, not only do we know your buildings from a point of when it was constructed, but how it was constructed. Buildings built in the 60s were designed a lot differently than the old high school that was on North Buxton. Different changes in technology, different methods of constructing things. So we really look at how buildings are built to understand what we need to do differently in those buildings. So if we were to look at adding on some additions, we would look at, do the adjacent additions have insulation? Is there asbestos tile that we need to be concerned about? Little different things that we would be looking at. Another thing we wanted to point out is, you have two primary entrances, and let's see if this, you can barely see my little green highlighter, but there's the South Drive circle, so Highway 92 is right down here, 9th Street is over here, so north is up. You have two primary entrances. You have that one to the south that people see coming from east or west on Highway 92, and then you have the people coming in like I did on my first time looking at the school. Stacia had me drive down Salem, down the pretty tree-covered street, and then it opens up, and then you see that Dreamcatcher logo on the side of the auditorium, which, unbeknownst to me at the time, was designed by our firm helped design that. So we know your buildings. We know how the buildings get used for the Irving PTO Purple Palooza. We know how the school gets transformed for the show choir and jazz competitions. We know how the Blake Fieldhouse becomes overrun for the Chris Street basketball tournament and volleyball tournaments. We see how your school and how your facilities get used and abused every single day. Another thing that we do as when we come in to look at projects, we bring in a team. It's just not myself, it's just not Chris. We come in with a team, all different very specific lenses. So we have a civil engineer that will come in. Probably one of their biggest concerns is if we do an addition to the south, how do we address stormwater so we don't have a repeat of the flooding issue that happened in the courtyard 3-4 years ago? We have structural engineers. Looking at those construction buildings, where do we need to be looking at expansion joints? We have electrical engineers. Where would you put where's the loading and things like that? So Chris, I'm not gonna speak for you, so I'm gonna let you talk about what you see as a mechanical engineer.
Yeah, when you look at the purple area there where possible additions could go, engineers do look at things quite differently. There's probably one of the most important buildings to me, sticks out from the northwest corner of the 1961. That's the mechanical plant. It's where all the electricity comes from. It's where all the cooling, all the heating comes from. That's one of the first things we look at is, do we have capacity to be able to handle an addition that far away or that close? What does that look like? We look at the buildings, 1961, there's tunnels there. I've been down through them. It's been quite a few years, but we're looking at ways to transport energy to and from where that new, with the least amount of disruption to certain spaces. And there's, we just look at it as a team from all different perspectives. And for one reason only, we try to reduce surprises. We really don't want to see surprises on construction projects, and we really do minimize those quite a bit.
And so when we think about the unlimited possibilities, the first time I got to tour the music edition back in 2007 was actually July 2010. We went to go watch the Carousel Theater's performance of The Wizard of Oz. It just happened to be the night of performance when there was the tornado in town, and so we all had to go, the musical had to be stopped, and we all had to go into the music wing while the tornado went over. So looking at the unlimited possibilities, we look at where we can provide value, where we can provide that additional branding, much like we did with the Indianola sign on the side of this building. How can we build a cohesive image for the entire campus? This is a unique facility that I would very much love to work on. And so with that, here is time for the question that we asked earlier. How do you define success?
Project?
Yep.
Yeah. It's seamless, on time, on budget, and better than expected.
No pressure.
Out of the box thinking.
Out of the box thinking?
I have the advantage of looking at our products with age. So for me, I define success as, does it still work the way it's supposed to 7 or 8 years later?
7 or 8 years.
Is it adaptable?
Adaptability,
Yeah.
flexibility, stand the test of time, really, is what you're saying, Ken, in a sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And you said 7 to 8 years, Ken. Is there a, I mean, I was thinking 25 years when you and I know things change an awful lot, but is there a reason the 7 to 8 that you had in mind?
Well, I could also say, well, 5 didn't seem to work and 10 was too much. But no,
Okay.
as I, over my years on the school board at different times, I've noticed how our needs seem to change in about every 7 to 8 years. There's different thrusts, there's different ways of looking at things. Theoretically, our amount of students will be different, although we haven't got that to work out too well yet. Technology changes, so that type of thing.
Good. Anybody else?
I'd like to know how you're effectively going to help us communicate to the district the need for this project.
Okay. Communicate the need for this project. All right. Anybody else?
I think for what we're looking at, like multifunction,
Okay.
something that's multifunctional or it's going to be used and adaptable and, yeah. It's not just pretty,
Okay.
yeah.
Functional, stand the test of time. Communicate with the public, the need for it. Are you thinking along the line there of something in preparation for a bond, or not necessarily, or just in general
Just,
community?
the auxiliary building isn't a high, a lot of people don't know about it,
Okay.
why we would need that. So
Yes.
this is going to require some communication to
Exactly.
sell that idea.
Thank you. Okay. Anything? Anybody else?
All of those. I go back to what Ben said at the beginning of the budget. Success was equal making it within the budget.
Scope,
First, but all
schedule,
the rest of those are
budget,
right in there.
and exceed the expectations, right? I mean, you didn't quite say it that way. I kind of
That's always good.
Over deliver.
promise and over deliver. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. So this picture might look like a standard media center, something you would expect to see anywhere today. But do you guys want to see what it looked like when we walked in and saw it for the first time ourselves?
It's out of the box thinking. Same thing. Go back one.
Go back one, okay.
Just show.
So keep in mind, look at the windows on the above the bookshelves on the right, the windows on the far portion of the side, and the windows on the far left. We'll look at that one more time. Those are the exact same windows. We've replaced those windows with better performing windows, but we can get into that a little bit later. This school was experiencing growing pains, not in terms of population, but in terms of the programming that it needed to deliver. It had an influx of students that had English as second language learners. It had influx of students that needed special needs. And so those programming needed additional space. And they didn't have that space. And so when we walked through here, we saw students learning how to play the violin in the vestibule. We saw corridors being used for storage. down the main corridor, there were probably $4,000 worth of cellos just sitting there. Could easily been destroyed. So the school was needing space for the programming. When we dived into this project during programming to understand what they were trying to, try to understand what we could solve, we could have just easily done addition off to the south and just added square footage that way. But we found out through discussions with the users of the building that this courtyard doesn't get maintained. So every summer, the fire marshal comes through and does their annual inspection, flags them. Hey, this is a fire hazard. They actually had a student climb onto the roof and get into this courtyard. And because the corridor was being used as storage, the kid couldn't get out. So the kid actually spent the night in the courtyard until the next morning when the teacher found them. There's a lot of different challenges. We had our structural engineer look at this. Well, there's over 5 feet of grade change in 50 feet. So there had to be some accessibility scope that we needed to look at. We looked at the age of the buildings. You had the original 1950s addition to the north, then it wrapped around to the 1960s, and the 1980s were in the back. And we found out that those walls couldn't support an addition going on top. So our structural engineer had to create their own structural system inside this courtyard to create that tree-like structure to support that addition. When we looked at these walls, there's no insulation. There's nothing. The bricks go up to the top. There's columns that support the roof. That's it. There's nothing. You could see daylight going through portions of these walls. So when we looked at the space, we looked at infilling it. We added insulation to protect the sound. We looked at those windows. We replaced all those windows and made them more efficient, not in terms of thermal performance because it's now inside, but because of sound transmission. We didn't want to have those classrooms disrupted by the space inside, by what's happening inside.
So from an out-of-the-box thinking perspective too, we actually added all this square footage from that slide, and we reduced the energy usage of this building. Reduced it, because we got rid of all those walls that were so terrible. So that was also something that the district wished to do is reduce their energy bills in this case, and we found some solutions.
And so we also looked at how do we get natural daylight, because we were going to be taking 8 classrooms that had direct daylight from the outside and making them interior. And so you can see we did everything we could to add a whole bunch of light on the south and north to just flood that space. And we let the light bleed into those other classrooms to provide that natural daylight so they wouldn't miss that circadian rhythm that happens throughout the school day. So the next step we had to do was we had to communicate how we were going to achieve this. We had the building users we had to get approval from. We had the school district staff we had to approve, the equivalents of Chada and Art and Bernie. We had the school board we had to buy in on. And then we also had to get the community in general to buy in on this project. So one of the tools that we used was actual virtual reality goggles. So you see on the left side, there's the lady with the goggles on walking through the space. And then you see on the right an actual computer rendering of that same space showing the new entrance to that media center. We used several of these. We had one public meeting, it was a school board meeting, board workshop just like this, open to the public. We had it at our office in West Des Moines, and allowed the school board members to have their board workshop in our nice large forum, and then try on the walk through the space afterwards.
And I think, can you go back? Because I'd like to just comment on this virtual reality. I think, Ben, to your point, do we meet the expectations? And the greatest moment, if you go back even one more, please, Michael. We walked into this room for the first time with the school board. I think most of the board members were there, but the president, Liz Cox, was there. And Liz walks in, and I'm right behind her. She goes, "Oh, this is beautiful." And then she says the words that she goes, "I feel like I've already been in here before, though." And that was from the virtual reality. Looks so good that when you get in there, it was just familiar. So it took out a little more of that surprise factor that, oh, I didn't realize we're gonna have this here, or this would look here. No, it was exactly what she was looking for. And she was one who gave input during this virtual reality process and said, I'd really like to take one of these horizontal structural members and make it a beam so that we could put a curtain there. We could use it. That's the functionality part. Be flexible. You do more with the space if you do that. So it's not just necessarily Shive Hattery coming up with his ideas. It's really listening and making sure that we're hearing the stakeholders talk about what's important to them, and what we might try to think of everything that room is going to be used for. But it's usually the user groups and somebody else that'll come up with that last 5% or 10%. And it's a wonderful collaborative environment. If you go forward one more now, Michael, what you'll see is on the right-hand side, that looks like a photo of something. That's actually one of the images that you would look at as you have your goggles on. It's actually a computer. It's a computer-generated image, and that's where you get to walk through a set of doors and go right in and start to see what it is that the new facility looks like. Sorry, interrupt.
Nope, that's perfectly all right. So I think this next slide really goes towards Ben's comments about on-scope, schedule, and budget. So our process, probably similar to any other architecture firm, has several milestones and benchmarks for the actual creating construction documents and getting a process built. The first one is define the program, define the problems, so that we know what we're trying to solve. The next one is to design the solution, and then to develop the solution, and then to document the solution. Then we can also, step 5, determine how much this thing is going to cost on bid day. And then step 6, it would also be making sure that this project is delivered on time, on budget. So when you think about this, breaking this down, this is regardless if you're doing a brand new building, if you're doing a high-functioning poultry farm as a research facility, you name it. If it's an auxiliary building, these are roughly the same steps that you'll have on what you work on. One thing that we will always talk about at every meeting, whether it's just with Bernie or Jana or with Youth School Board, is the scope that we're delivering meet your needs? Is it on schedule? If it is not on schedule, what can we do to get it back on schedule? Is it on budget? If it is not on budget, what do we need to change in the scope that still meets your needs and meets the financial responsibilities that you guys have to meet? And then the last point is buy-in. We do not want to leave any meeting with dissent. So, because we have found that when there's that dissent in the group, that is when projects fail. And so we want to make sure that, you may not be in 100% in agreement with the carpet selection, but the building is moving on, it's meeting the needs that you guys have. And so those are the 4 things that we'll discuss at every meeting. We have several milestones to discuss and make sure that we are presenting to you, that we're delivering to you what you need.
All right, this is our design process.
And this is a mechanical engineer's dream right here.
It's too small. You can cover up one eye and you still won't be able to read anything on there. And it's just there to show you, in general, 10,000-foot level, what the design process looks like behind the scenes. In 2000, there were 4 of us. In the year 2000, there were 4 of us that got together, donated our lunches for 6 months on Mondays, and we started documenting what the design process looks like, because it is complex. The design process has a lot of room for error in it.
Cable TV bill
And repeatability.
is not in the top 1%. The answer also is, well, Site TV.
I can't compete with
You know what that is? And I'll just put it on hold so we can finish it when we're done here.
I was just relieved it wasn't coming from
I couldn't tell where it was coming from. So in behind the scenes, behind the curtain, this design process has served us well since 2000. And if you look at the y-axis, the vertical axis, you'll see that if you could read it, there'd be disciplines. There'd be architects, mechanical engineers, structural engineers, civil, all these different people that we have under our roof. And if you look on the x-axis, that's time. As the project progresses across, we've got these gaps in between there. Those are built-in gaps. Those are where everybody stops and takes a look and makes sure the team is there together. Because if it doesn't, it can get really expensive and things can start to go haywire. And we recognized that back then. That if we all get there as a team and we stop, we wait for everybody, if somebody's ahead, and then you keep moving on. It's very specific. There's a lot of interaction, a lot of collaboration between the architects and all the different types of engineers to make sure that we get there successfully. And that's part of what we do. This is the process that really helps us meet that expectation and exceed that expectation. Because it's proven, it has been changed since 2000. It's probably been modified 2 or 3 times. Some of it because some processes are just better now. We're using different kind of drawing processes, Revit versus AutoCAD. There's other things like that that have improved. But for the most part, this process is pretty true. There's a third thing you probably should know about it, and that is that while this building, for example, has been constructed and it's got over 1 million parts and pieces that have never ever been put together before, ever. It's unique. It's the only one of its kind. You won't find another building. There's not another one just like this building anywhere. But the process for how to go through the design is about 90% already on that template. And it's just a little bit of tweaking that we have to do to modify it to make good better. And that's what results in really good results. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't result in really good results. That's a little bit repetitive there. But it brings us the kind of results that meet expectations or exceed expectations. Next slide, please. So how do you prove that? Well, it's difficult to prove it in every category, but we can talk about money for a little bit because we know that you're responsible. You've got that fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers. This is what it looks like. If you look at that green line, there's a 5 by. It says, and it's basically percent construction cost. And if you have a project, I don't care if it's a home project, I don't care if it's a project for the school, you should usually have a contingency set aside. A little bit of money set aside for something because you're going to rip into a floor, you're going to rip into a wall, and you're going to find a conduit or something that needs to be moved. It's just going to happen. And it's rare that you're going to find a contractor that'll say, hey, I'll do that for free. I'll just go ahead and move that. That's getting worse and worse these days, by the way. It's getting harder and harder to try to, to have that kind of relationship because everything comes down to dollars and cents, so much of it. And so what you'll find is we save 5%. We will ask you to budget 5% of the construction cost for some changes. Well, 3% is what our target is at Shive Hattery. The next line down is blue line, and that's 3%.
Chris, is that new construction, is remodel higher or not?
Remodel is higher, but we don't change that number. New construction is easier to get lower usually. But there's other factors too, and thanks for asking. The other factors are, is it multidiscipline? Or is it just a electrical project? It's a little bit easier to contain and define if it's just one contractor. But the minute, I don't know if any of you, I keep bringing up a bathroom or kitchen remodel. If you've ever had it, there's usually more than just one contractor and things get a little bit messier, and that's part of it. What I wanted to point out here is that the 3% would be the expectation. 5% would be standard, industry standard. And this is, and the numbers below 1%, 0.8% was this district office. Okay, so that was recent, that was real, that can be validated. We were at 0.8% change orders. The next one was the Irving boiler project at less than 0.4, and again, the auditorium HVAC less than 0.4. We just did this analysis, actually, just finished up for another school district, and we were right at 1% for over 10 years of projects. 10 years of projects, and roughly 15 projects in that time period. And so the change orders do make a difference, because that's where a lot of times people get your taxpayers will start to question some things. Why are we paying extra for this? Why is that? Next slide, please.
Before we go to the next slide, I do want to point out that Irving on that is the one from 2 or 3 years ago when we replaced the boiler and all those lines. It's not the one that we talked about from 97, but it was the more recent one.
So what we do to try to exceed your expectations, or we try to give you the whole picture. We try to tell you this is what it's going to cost. Because I could tell you the bid day, the construction cost is going to come in at X amount of dollars, $2 million. But there's usually more cost than that. There's cost with furniture, fixture, equipment. There's cost with building insurance, builder's risk insurance. There's cost with special inspections. There are all these costs, and what we really pride ourselves on doing is trying to give you the biggest 10,000-foot picture of where the costs are going to go. And then we get to that little green line, that little ring, so the left side really represents all the different costs that go into your project. From the initial, here's the first budget. We think it's going to cost this, and what is it going to look like on bid day? That cost is here, and here's some other stuff, yada, yada. Well, the green portion is actual, those are the change orders. That's a 5% change order contingency bucket. That's what we're going to use to pay for things that were a surprise. And then we categorize them on top of that. And we meet with you every month to talk about this during construction. And some of that might be, it's the architect's fault. Notice I said architect and not engineer. It's the architect's fault. Or it might be an owner change. You might have seen something and decided, you know what, we would like to have something change. We're going to have 10 more outlets on this entire wall over this direction. It might be we tore into that wall in an unforeseen condition. That's the kind of stuff that happens in the remodel, why remodel costs are a little bit higher. There's a lot of unknown conditions in something like that. So we track them and we categorize them. And then we talk about them with you, usually on a monthly basis, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on how often any kind of pay applications are processed. Any questions on that? That's where we think this process that we've had has just been phenomenal, because we are just really doing well in this category for providing taxpayer value.
And to tag off of Donna's comments about communicating, one of the things that we'll do is, when we look at that bond referendum and how much money that is going to cost, we will work with Jonna and the district staff to identify where that wants to be, and then we'll have that broken down. So we'll have the big picture cylinder, and then we'll have the little tiny cylinders for each sub-project, so that you have a true comprehensive picture of what is happening financially.
Could you go back one slide for me? Because there's one thing one more slide. Sorry. This process on the timeline, I did forget to tell you that Shive Hattery continuously looks at the cost of your project. And we go to schematic design and we do the cost opinion. You can hire a third independent party, we could hire somebody, but we look at it internally, because we know that if we go too far with a project that you can't afford, it's not going to do us any good. It's going to be a surprise. It's not going the right direction. So we want to have those conversations really early. And that was the same as on this building. And we had conversations like that. Hey, I think this is right on budget. Well, you know what? If we do it this way, it's going to cost a little more. We're going to have to increase the budget, and altogether, this project came in under budget. But that's the kind of conversations that help drive for successful project at the end. At the end of construction, not necessarily at the end of 8 years, Ken. We'll talk about that in a little bit, though.
Okay, so looking at successful bond referendums, in the statement of qualifications, I think it's towards the end, you'll see Anamosa, Clear Creek, Humana, maybe Cedar Rapids Community School District, maybe one more in there where we've had recent successful bond referendums. One of the critical things that we're going to be doing is on step one, that building stakeholder support. That is the grassroots organizations. Those are the PTOs. Those are the music boosters. When you think about who fundraised for the marching band uniforms, who fundraised for the stage curtain, it was the music boosters and the athletic boosters. It's those boosters, it's those organizations that help feed the school district, that help improve it. So the first thing we need to do is to get their input and to get their buy-in, to get their support. One of the things you'll see, number two, is kind of happening at the same time. Shive Hattery will help build the digital media to help the school district communicate the need. We've helped with videos, we've helped with still photography, we've helped with digital renderings. I will say, at a bond referendum level, you don't want to get too detailed, because then people's preferential choice of, it has too much glass, or it looks too expensive. It allows people to vote on preference, not on the need. But you can see there's several different steps that we'll walk you through. Some school districts feel that they want to take the lead and have architects just be the support behind them. We can do that. Other school districts are on the opposite spectrum where they want the architect to lead them in the process of getting them through the bond referendum. And then there's always in the middle where we can come side by side and work hand in hand. Now, one of the neat things about, maybe not so neat, maybe it's a double-edged sword, is with me being in the community, I'll hear that. I'll hear that when I'm at True Value. I'll hear that when I'm shopping at Hy-Vee. We'll hear those things. I'll be here to be a sounding voice. I'll be here to hear what's happening so that we can help guide. Don't think there's many other architects that can do that for Indianola. So it's one of those things where, I'm fully committed to the school district. The other point that we wanted to make is the state has determined specific dates on when to hold a bond referendum. Don't know how familiar you are with that. I believe Piper Jaffrey is now Piper Sandler is the school district's financial advisor. Once we start working as a three-person team, we can start communicating with each other and start sharing information to help build the case for the school district. So there's with those dates for bidding, there's also deadlines to get certain paperwork in. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys.
So when you're building the stakeholder support at the beginning, with the timeline, if we're thinking September, obviously it needs to be done remotely, probably with COVID, like, if you're getting public input or brainstorming or, those initial, have you been doing much of that?
Our office has. We've had varying degrees of success. We use different technology where people can actually text. We'll have a live presentation going on, and we'll ask poll questions, and that's people can type in a 4-digit code, and then they can answer A, D, any multiple choice, or they can fill in what word describes this space, and we can do that technology. It really depends on who the community is that's using it. When we first started using some of that technology at the March and the April, when projects were still rolling out, we found that some of those projects, the general public wasn't ready for it. It happened to be in a school district, I believe it was a school district in eastern Iowa, where it was an older community, and there was just an age technology gap, and so they had a little struggle. So the lessons learned have already happened, and we've refined our process on making those better.
And I think you still rely heavily on those avenues you talked about, boosters, things like the people like that, groups like that, because on voting day, that's a big question, is who wants to come out on voting day and make a difference? And those are the people, those connections are usually the ones that'll say, yeah, it's worth my time today to do that. We did catch wind that the city looks like they're going to be doing a bond referendum as well, but I don't know when the date is, whether or not that's something that plays into the decision-making process or not. We'll see. So just be aware of that.
Typically, we don't want to have on voting day. You don't want to have a multi-government bid, government vote on the same day, because usually you'll get the no votes come in to hit both versus yes, no. So.
Do you know them, John?
Yeah, I talked to Ryan, Art and I talked to Ryan, and he said 2 to 3 years for City Hall and Library.
It's a couple years off.
Good.
Okay.
That's very favorable then.
Yeah.
Yes, that is very good. So, in the presentation, we hope we've shown that we've been committed to you from in successful projects. We haven't talked specifically about a lot of projects, but there have been a lot of projects that have been very successful. Ken, I'm still a little concerned about answering your 7 to 8 year period, how to prove that. I can tell you that air handling units that I designed 23 years ago are still operating. that doesn't necessarily mean that it's successful. They have been, but that's an air handling unit. That's a little bit different than a space, because I feel like there's something that we're really talking about that from a flexibility, how things change in curriculum alone. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, the open classroom concept was it. There were no doors on my high school. And that apparently didn't work. I was too loud or something, and then all of a sudden we had to put doors back on. I mean, we know that there are trends in this industry. And so when the flexibility comes in, we've added doors to a lot of those open type classrooms, elementary schools in particular. And not only from that perspective, from just doors, but there's a security driven issue there too. There's and how can security today withstand the test of time of 8 years? Because I will say that might be a little more difficult. We don't know what the next security threat is going to be, but we're talking about it. And and Michael's a specialist in this area. He has gone to training on this for school safety. So we meet with police departments to try to build that collaboration. Believe it or not, they can talk to us a lot, but there are some things they just can't tell the general public about how they're going to address a situation even inside a school, because they don't want that leaking out to anybody. So, but we try to do that, but it is difficult to meet the test of time with some of those things. And some things, 8 years is a lot. Some things, that's not long enough. But did I address it?
No, to some extent, because it is flexibility. And, a standard example I can give is schools, middle schools and high school had computer labs. 7, 8 years ago, they were great. Now every kid's got his own computer, don't quite need what they are, and that's what we're talking about type thing. So as that building was designed, that room did stand the test of time because it can now be used for something else, that type of thing. And therefore, are their buildings built with enough of the central core that I think is your job, enough electricity, to be able to maybe double outlets in 10 years, whatever it is, that type of thing, the flexibility. We don't want to build for last year, we want to build for 5 or 10 years down the line, if it's possible.
Yep. One of the things that I really strive for when working with our architects is give us some ceiling space. And whether you choose us or somebody else, ask for ceiling space for that future flexibility. You're going to be running stuff in that ceiling space for the next 75 years of the life cycle of that building. You will be running something. I don't know what it's going to look like. It could be piping or electrical conduit, cabling. It could be communications. We know communications is probably going to be the biggest thing, but it doesn't cost that much more to build that free space. And if you've ever been up above a ceiling that just doesn't have space, everything gets more expensive. It gets more expensive to construct, it gets more expensive to maintain. Plus you find a lot of things up there that just don't, it was too hard to remove the pipe, so we just left it. There's a lot of things like that. And, it just, sometimes designers can just be all about, we just got to make this the highest ceiling you can get. That's okay. Just get more area right up above it.
I can tell you that there's probably 6 feet of plenum on this wall, 4 feet on that wall. I can also tell you that when we designed this building, we made it so that it spanned from the north to the south wall, so you didn't have any columns, so that when the district decided to renovate this space 20, 30 years down the line, there was no load-bearing internal walls that you guys had to work around. So just little things like that we really put into our everyday thought to make the district's lives better for both everyday maintenance as well as future-proofing their facilities.
I may have a really weird question, but so I know you guys have done quite a bit here and you know the school district really well. Do you feel you could think out of the box and get creative with things that we may be looking down the future as far as say we have a project in 2 years and then the next 2 years we have another project that's going to be like a phase 2 or 3. Once you get kind of comfortable somewhere, you kind of stay in that same frame. I think we need to think out of the box a lot of what we want to be doing 5, 10 years down the road. And sometimes you get so familiar with something, you don't think out of the box anymore. So that's my biggest question is, can you guys think out of the box moving forward to whatever projects we come up with?
I would say yes, because going back to that conference, the virtual conference this year, I got to tour 9 different schools from the comfort of my own home. And I see it more as, I go to all these different school districts around the state. It just happens that Indianola is my home. And so, we have the home field advantage by having us here. So.
Yes, and we like that challenge, but we have to get there together. And no different than trying to align the people that are voting. You have to have that vision and make sure that vision is strong. We don't want to have an albatross at the end of the day that people wonder, what in the world were they thinking? But you can think outside the box. That courtyard infill that was outside the box. That was not normal to try to come up with that. And as a result, the school district has said, we want no more courtyards anymore. Whenever we have a chance to infill one, we're going to do it for many different reasons. But the challenge is during that design process really is for the very first 3 sheets that we had on there were it's very collaborative with the owner. What can you take? What can you do? What do you want to do? And it depends on how much involvement you have with the stakeholders, who the stakeholders are. You have to identify the stakeholders first, because we can't listen to everybody. You'll have nothing we'll hit nothing if we try to target everyone. And usually what makes that, it comes down to 1, 2, or 3 of you that will say, okay, I'll take the lead on this and we'll take the responsibility and we will drive this project. And that's where you really start to get some really neat ideas. Then you come in and you have stuff on the walls, and then people are going to go around and you take these buttons basically and you put them on different things, different images that you like. That's all part of the pre-design process is to find out what looks, is that, if you look at the south exposure for the high school and the entrance, what are you looking for? Are you looking for identity? We can give you identity, but we don't really want it to be a reminder that Shive Hattery was here. This has to be something you own. This has to be something that, when we look at roofs, and this is really mundane, I suppose, but 20 years ago when we were looking at roofs, this district really wanted metal roofs. It wanted metal roofs. That wasn't something that we typically would do. But there was enough mindset in this community that says, I can relate to the metal roofs. I'm paying taxes. I want a metal roof. And so we on the east side of the high school, east side of the auditorium, is a metal roof. Since then, we've changed more to EPDM type roofs, 90 mil, really good roofing. But we really do listen. We have to listen to the community and then try to set that vision. And it sometimes can be a stretch to try to think outside the box with the community. So it's a risk we're willing to take, but we'll take it with you. We do not want to stand out on our own for that, because we don't want to give you something you won't be proud of.
Because that's, to echo that, we didn't present any pretty drawings of what it could be, because we would have been designing in a vacuum without your input. And so we specifically, purposely made this presentation without that little step, because we didn't have your individual input.
Time for maybe another question. If anybody has a burning question they want to get out there and haven't asked.
Do you typically survey communities or people or the stakeholders? Do you have a survey monkey that you can use and target the specific questions to people to see what, or are you not interested in doing that?
Oh, we'll come alongside you and support you. We will take the lead on it if you want. We could have a microsite so the community can go to there and we can get input on a microsite from different people. We can do a little or a lot. It's really what you think you need Shive Hattery to do. That's the key. And I know that's a really vague answer, but there are some where we have just barely provided, a little bit documentation, maybe a rendering or something like that. Some school districts are really particular about how any messages get out, and we've got to be really careful about that. Make sure that any message that gets out goes through you, not around you as the school district, whoever the identified stakeholders are that will be controlling the vision internally. So. welcome. Well, we're probably at the end of the time, aren't we?
I think we're right 8:30 in the dot. Well, sure appreciate you giving your evening to us and filling us in on your process and speaking with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Do we need any of these extra copies? Is there anybody missing that?
Yeah, you could leave one for sure for free.